He's immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
What? This is the end game.
Welcome, everybody. It is Friday, May 23rd, 2025, the 124th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. I feel like I'm off kilter somehow, or maybe just not as centered as I usually am, or something. Something feels off. Don't know what it is. Just going to have to push on through. All right, so we are going into the Memorial Day weekend. Next week, I will do shows on Tuesday and Friday. I will not have a show on Monday. And I hope you all have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. There's also been, I was on whitehouse.gov earlier, and they have a notice there about the lowest possible gas prices for Memorial Day in years and years. And apparently just news clippings from all around the country about how low the gas prices are this year. Feel normal to me, but hey, I don't really focus on gas prices very much. But anyhow, let's get into more important matters. And I want to start, I want to highlight this one little bit, and then I want to spend kind of the rest of the show talking about a phenomenon that I think we can observe as having happened this week. And there's a lot of parts to it. So I want to spend most of the rest of the show on that. But before we get there, yesterday, I guess the House went ahead and passed the big, beautiful bill, also known as Mike Johnson's package, the BBB, very similar to Build Back Better, but in an inversion. And I don't think it's an evil inversion. I think that program was the evil version. So I said the other day, I might have to eat the words about not thinking the thing would get done by this week. And so in the House, it did. It doesn't mean that everything is done, but it's done there. John was looking through it yesterday. I'm sure he talked about it on Daily Herald, but he said that from what he had seen so far, it wasn't as bad as he's accustomed to, which I guess is something. So anyhow, we're talking about spending because now we've got this big, new, beautiful bill that's going to commit the United States to spending a whole lot of money. And this is kind of just in that domain. The U.S. GAO, that's the Government Accountability Office, said Thursday that DOT's pause on funding for a Biden administration electric vehicle charging program is illegal under the 1974 law restricting a president's ability to block or impound money appropriated by Congress. And so this is the fight we've been talking about for a year, maybe longer than a year. This is the fight that's been brewing. Russ Vought is always kind of out ahead of all of that stuff. And so he jumped on this. By the way, I think we want this fight. I think we're going to win this fight. I think it's a necessary fight to have. So all of this is good. But Russ Vought jumped on it and said, just so we are clear over the next several months, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, is a quasi-independent arm of the legislative branch that played a partisan role in the first term impeachment hoax. They are going to call everything an impoundment because they want to grind our work to manage taxpayer dollars effectively to a halt. These are non-events with no consequence, rear view mirror stuff. And so Russ Vought comes out, not hard, but politely, truthfully, against the Government Accountability Office. And so you might imagine that is not the sort of thing the Uniparty would react well to. This is Politico relaying the opinion of one or another intelligence agency. Rear view mirror stuff. Trump's budget chief mocks GAO's impoundment option. And we don't need to go through all of this. It's not long, but I want to highlight some things. So they are going to get the GAOs back relative to Russ Vought. That's what the purpose of this article is. The Government Accountability Office issued an opinion Thursday that the administration made an illegal impoundment by refusing to spend appropriated funds on infrastructure that supports electric vehicles. Vought predicted the GAO would continue to make similar findings in the coming months, but those findings won't matter, he added. And again, they won't matter. So it's their opinion that Trump is doing something illegal according to the 1974 law that hasn't really been tested and that can't possibly pass the test, because there's no way in the world the founders would have intended for the Congress to be able to bind the president's hands in that way and force the president as the plenary authority of the executive branch to operate agencies in his administration that are working antithetical to his agenda. There's no way we would have had that situation, because it takes away the ability for the people to select a president in the first place. And I understand that it wasn't direct back then, but they would still select their congressmen, and those congressmen would then become the electors. Now, in addition to the issue of impoundment, they're focused on a Biden-era infrastructure package that made investments for electric vehicles and the infrastructure. We've had the auto pen issue all week, for many weeks now. And with the auto pen issue at play, with Joe Biden's illegitimacy at play, with the dementia at play, then we have another level to this, that this legislation might be totally meaningless to begin with. It certainly can't be binding the hands of a future administration, to make that future administration go along with this plan, when plans like this were part of the reason that the country has given Donald Trump his obvious and overwhelming mandate. Come back to this in just a second. I'm just taking a quick pause. All right, everybody's doing okay. Let us continue. Let us continue with the Politico article. The GAO is an independent, nonpartisan federal agency that helps Congress with oversight of the federal government and is now pursuing at least 39 investigations into whether the Trump administration has violated the Impoundment Control Act, the 51-year-old law that bars presidents from, quote, from usurping the, quote, power of the purse Congress is granted under Article 1 of the Constitution. And that is not usurping the power of the purse. Congress can say, this is how much we have budgeted for all of these products or projects, and we commit the government to spending for these projects. And then the president says, well, it's my administration that has to execute all of this. You can't make my administration do something just because you put spending in place, because you put a budget in place, because you've allotted money to certain specific projects or interests. And he's not going to allow himself to be forced, hence the fight. Also, the idea of independent agencies, we've talked about that at long length over the last 6 months, but that's not a real thing. That's just the branding. That's what they call it. We're going to call it independent and nonpartisan. So even if in reality it is not independent at all, it's just an instrument of the Uniparty, and that it's not nonpartisan at all because it's an instrument of the Uniparty, do you get to define the thing as its opposite? That is total inversion within the false reality. It is the opposite of that. It is not independent and it is not nonpartisan. It supports the only party which is the uniparty. And it's certainly not nonpartisan when it comes to the uniparty versus the people. Good twin versus evil twin. Those are the parties. And in that sense, it is not nonpartisan at all. It is partisan to the evil twin. Vote called GAO a quasi-independent arm of the legislative branch in a social media post accusing the agency of playing a partisan role in the impeachment hoax of Trump's first presidency. There were 2 impeachment hoaxes. Although I guess the second one was technically after he was president. During Vote's first stint as White House budget director, the watchdog concluded in early 2020 that the Trump administration violated the impoundment law by freezing aid to Ukraine, issuing the finding after the House voted to impeach the president for those actions and others. Vote predicted the GAO will be concluding the same in its new investigations as Trump administration agencies cancel, shift, and withhold billions of dollars Congress passed into law under orders from the Department of Government Efficiency Initiative started under Elon Musk and the president's executive actions. And I would suggest that the Doge initiative is not the reason why this is happening. The Doge initiative is the narrative instrument through which the administration informs the American people about why it must do what it is doing. I don't think that they came in and gave Donald Trump all this new information and were like, you have to do this way. I don't see that as possible. And I think that from Vote's comments, from Trump's comments, from the rest of it, we can understand that this plan has been in place for a long time, predating this Trump term. And so the idea that Doge came in and then directed this somehow is anachronistic. And I guess what would be the right word? It's not chronological. Suppose that will at least capture what I'm trying to get across. Okay. So let's leave the American politics and budget stuff behind for a bit. We may not talk about Mike Johnson's package for the rest of the show. I don't plan to, but you never know when something like that might just rise up. Okay, that's very immature. Let us go to the Israel issue. This was from Monday in The Hill. Netanyahu, Israel will control all Gaza, take over aid deliveries. The prime minister made his remarks as the Israel military started in earnest a large-scale operation called Gideon's Chariot that Netanyahu said amounted to his country essentially taking over Gaza. This is part of defeating Hamas in parallel with the tremendous military pressure, our massive entry to essentially take over all of Gaza and strip Hamas of all ability to plunder humanitarian aid, Netanyahu said, according to a transcript provided by Reuters. This is the war and victory plan. Netanyahu said the Israeli military would take control of food and aid distribution to Palestinians in the Strip in coordination with American companies. The method is distribution points that are secured by the IDF, preventing Hamas's access and allowing American companies to distribute the food and medicine aid to the population, Netanyahu said. It takes time. We are going to set up the first points in a few days and add to them later, eventually reaching a situation where we have an area that is entirely controlled by the IDF and the entire civilian population of Gaza can get there and receive the aid, and Hamas receives nothing. So we're supposed to believe that Hamas are essentially, and I mean, listen, maybe it's true to the extent that Hamas is a global regime, an outgrowth of the global regime intelligence apparatus. So it's possible that they are doing whatever they can to stop the plan that has obviously been in place for quite a while from coming to fruition. Okay. So if we are using these terms a bit euphemistically, a bit metaphorically, if Hamas in this case is an avatar for the interference from the global regime, then fine, it's Hamas, right? But the reason that they're going in to take over is not because Hamas is interfering with food aid. Honestly, I've said for a long time, I think that all of this is one big construction project, and they've had a plan, and they're going to use this territory, and they're going to shift some people around perhaps. But at the end of the day, there will be a process of rewriting and redrawing the lines on maps, not just in that region, but around the world. And I think that we can see that process taking shape. And what we get are narrative cover stories, either to convince the public that the project is good and necessary, or to convince them that every part of the project is destructive to everything as we've ever known it. It's just going to be permanent war, whatever possible to stop the rearrangement on the board that is taking place, right? They don't want to lose Ukraine. That's one of their proxy states. But they're going to lose Ukraine. So how do they make the people reject the regime's loss of Ukraine? And hence we get all of the bullshit and psyops, the narrative war, okay? And again, none of this precludes kinetic action from taking place on the ground. It's just a matter of which sides are actually warring. We have to be straight about that. And the stories we get from the media never are. The stories we get from the regime never are. Those all exist within the context of the framing as the regime has come to inculcate it in us over decades, over our entire lives. Okay? So if we're looking at things through that frame, knowing that frame is wrong, then our analysis within that frame is not going to make any sense. And so we have to move outside that frame. And it's important to be able to do that, because otherwise what we are signing ourselves up for and what we are morally condoning, which many people are, is just like unremitting bloodshed. Unrelenting, I should say, bloodshed. That just never stops. That's what we are signing ourselves up for. Remember a couple years ago when the paragliding go-kart incident first happened, and then for the weeks and maybe months after that, we heard the people in the Con Inc. op, all the people who were like Ron DeSantis simps and the rest of it, the same NAFO people who used to be on the side of Ukraine, very anti-Russia. They were, in this case, they were like, Israel needs to glass the desert. Like, just set everything on fire so even the sand melts. Those are neocons. They've wanted to take over the world by installing democracies all over the world through the use of military force. That's it. Total revolution all the time. They're descendants of Trotsky. But rather than people's revolution, it's a story about people's revolution and war. Okay? Real war, story about the revolution. And they use force to get what they want. So we know what the plan is. We know how it's taken place in the past. And we know the neocon agenda. And that's what we're resisting. We are resisting the globalist agenda, the global regime. And neocons are their militant faction. And so we should recognize the militant faction when it rears its head. And we do not need to morally commit ourselves to that position because we've been told one side is good and one side is bad while they're lying about the sides. Okay? Let us continue. This was Axios on Tuesday, the day after. Trump, frustrated by Gaza war, wants Netanyahu to, quote unquote, wrap it up, according to U.S. officials. President Trump has been frustrated by the ongoing war in Gaza and upset by images of suffering Palestinian children, and has told his aides to tell Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu he wants him to wrap it up. Two White House officials tell Axios. U.S. and Israeli officials deny that Trump is prepared to abandon Israel or that he is applying intense pressure on Netanyahu. And I would say that that's my impression of Trump as well. He doesn't seem like he's abandoning anything. He also doesn't seem like he's applying pressure to Netanyahu, except for the fact that he's telling it as he sees it. But they admit there are growing policy differences between a president who wants to end the war and a prime minister who is massively expanding it. And we have seen continuously, since the paragliding go-kart incident, nothing but the longing for more war. And Netanyahu's not the guy in the Israeli government first, but greater than the government. At the decision-making level, Netanyahu is certainly not the most warmongering. There are people far worse than him. And oh, by the way, those people wanted him out of office in the last few years as well. From the left, they tried the color revolutions and the judicial uprising, judicial takeover of the government. And from the right, of course, Israel's 9/11 pinned on Netanyahu, who had the intelligence for a year, but still somehow allowed paragliding go-karts to float over the most heavily secured border in all of human history. So there are people pushing for the war, and they are not Netanyahu. If you think of Netanyahu in the same kind of character framing as you might think of Zelensky, although obviously not nearly as funny. Both of these people, whether they are on our side or on the regime side, whether they are totally controlled and acting out a script on our behalf, or if they are just doing what they have to do on behalf of that side, the results are the same. Everything they do backfires, makes them look worse, and makes their project look worse. Nothing has woken the people of this world up to the reality of Israel as it exists, as the regime proxy state, leaving aside the biblical Israel. Nothing has woken people up to the reality of that better than Netanyahu and everything that's happened since the paragliding go-kart incident. So I would suggest that he cannot be and should not be the focus in this story, nor the focus of our ire. There are people around him who want much worse, and the other side is trying to take him out as well. And again, without saying Netanyahu is any kind of good guy, we know who the regime attacks from both flanks. If the uniparty left and the uniparty right are attacking the same thing, you can pretty well assume that that thing presents a threat to both sides. And that's because both sides are the same side. The president is frustrated about what is happening in Gaza. He wants the war to end. He wants the hostages to come home. He wants aid to go in, and he wants to start rebuilding Gaza. And Trump has talked about the Gaza Riviera. Is that going to be real? Who knows? Is the Ben Gurion Canal going to be real? That seems like it's going to be real. And that's got to go right through there. It's like a construction project. In the days since Trump's trip to the region, the U.S. has been pressing both Israel and Hamas to accept a new proposal presented by White House envoy Steve Witkoff for a hostage and ceasefire deal. Witkoff has been speaking directly with Netanyahu and his top advisor, Ron Dermer, and to Hamas leadership through a back channel facilitated by Palestinian-American businessman Bashara Baba. The negotiations have shown little progress. Meanwhile, the IDF are proceeding with an operation to displace all 2 million Palestinians in Gaza to a humanitarian zone and flatten most of the enclave. Now, in this vision, that's entirely possible, that they are being relocated. And it's totally okay for people to feel however they will feel about that. But we've been hearing about that exact thing again for the entire time. So there's got to be something more going on there. That's not the goal of this new operation. That's always been one of the things. The logjam in the talks and the situation on the ground convinced Vice President Vance to scrap plans for a visit to Israel this week. His decision sheds light on how the U.S. feels about the current Israeli policy in Gaza. Well, maybe it does. Or maybe they just decided to have a different optics-oriented approach. Maybe they did something that Trump did not want them doing. And he did not want to put JD there taking pictures with Netanyahu as though they're on the same page about everything. Could be that. An Israeli official told Axios that at the moment, Netanyahu doesn't feel strong pressure from Trump. Of course he doesn't. If the president wants a hostage and ceasefire deal in Gaza, he needs to put much more pressure on both sides, the official said. Okay, so he's not pressuring Netanyahu. Are you saying he is pressuring the Palestinians or Hamas or Gaza or whatever, however you want to refer to it? He's not putting pressure on Netanyahu. Is he pressuring the other side? If he is pressuring the other side and not Netanyahu, then President Trump's influence on the situation could only be pro-Israeli, right? Other leaders are attempting to apply pressure. The leaders of the UK, France, and Canada issued a statement on Monday threatening to take steps against Israel over the war in Gaza. And Netanyahu is very upset about that. The British government announced on Monday that it is suspending free trade deal negotiations with Israel, imposed new sanctions on Israeli settlers involved in attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank, and summoned the Israeli ambassador to the Foreign Office in London. And I believe also I read that British Airways has stopped flights between London and Israel, or stopped any routes to Israel, I think. One area where Trump has put pressure on Netanyahu over the last 2 weeks is Israel's total freeze on humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza. A White House official told Axios the president was upset by pictures of suffering children and babies in Gaza and pressed the Israelis to reopen the gates. Now, I thought that they were getting in there to make sure people got aid, but they're freezing it? So weird. On Sunday, the Israeli cabinet approved the resumption of aid deliveries to Gaza, and on Monday, a dozen trucks with baby food and other supplies entered the enclave. The White House official said more needs to be done. Couple last notes from this. While Trump felt his Middle East trip was a success, he believes the war in Gaza is holding back his plans for the region, a senior White House official said. And again, I would agree with that. The point of all this is to hold back those plans. Okay? If you are the global regime, you are making this happen, and you are selling this war, this conflict to the world, then you are doing it for a reason. And if your war, as the global regime, is against the sovereign peoples and the sovereign leaders of the world who want to get rid of your system and eliminate that influence, if that's who the war is against, the entire thing looks completely different. While Trump felt his... Sorry, I just read that part. Sorry. I kind of almost went off in another direction and convinced myself not to. Not that it was bad. It's just focusing on this. The president may be saying, hey, listen, let's try to end the war. He might speak strongly, but his support is ironclad. Trump hostage response envoy Adam, I think that's Adam, but maybe it's Adon or Adan Bowler. And this is a guy that Ghost of Base Patrick Henry talks about all the time, this Bowler guy. Loves him. Big fan of Bowler. So he said, again, the president may be saying, hey, listen, let's try to end the war. He might speak strongly, but his support is ironclad. He stressed that a Washington Post report claiming the administration threatened to abandon Israel was fake. And we have heard again and again over the weeks, people claiming that was totally fake and was not at all the president's position. This is Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the... Oh, wait a second. Am I going out of order? I don't want to go out of order here. Let's reverse this. I'm going to edit on the fly. I want to be sure that we are. Here we are. Sorry, hold for processing. All right, there we are. So let's go to Wednesday. This is from Wednesday afternoon, okay? These clips went what I would call viral from my perception. Seemed like a lot of major accounts were posting this stuff on Twitter. People were arguing about it. It was getting posted all over Telegram, all over Truth Social. A lot of people saw this clip. Wednesday afternoon. This is Turning Point USA, the $100 million a year Turning Point USA, the give $5 million to Scott Pressler so he can generate the raw materials the election fraud system needs. Turning Point. Here is Charlie Kirk debating, as he always does, a college kid. And remember who used to do that a decade ago? Well, it was none other than Ben Shapiro. He would just appear on college campuses giving a talk. Then there would be Q&A. People would ask him questions, and then he would slam another college freshman or another college sophomore. And, you know, the thug life glasses would drop down from the screen, and Ben Shapiro was very cool then. Well, now Charlie Kirk has assumed that role. The exact same part in the exact same playbook for the exact same reason, just a decade later. Now it gets to be Charlie Kirk. So here is Charlie Kirk attempting to slam a college kid. And he doesn't do it.
Let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the.
I'm going to stop this a bunch of times. Are they equally evil is what Charlie Kirk began asking, because he wanted the person opposite him to answer that question so that he could then make the argument that there was no way to equate Israel and Hamas. One of them is good. One of them is evil. Just like in Russia, Ukraine, one of them was good and one of them was evil. Remember? I mean, the conning people all got that quite wrong, but, still Russia evil, Russia bad. Let's continue though. These are all rhetorical tricks. Okay. And I may not point out all of them, but Charlie Kirk is not a good faith operator in any sort of debate. And I'm not claiming that the other kid is either, by the way. But this is how conversations on Twitter go, basically.
Murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children. It's a futile. There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing.
And I have absolutely no idea what this kid is doing with the jumps. These little jumps are very, very strange. Again, as you can hear, he has taken in the entire central counter narrative. Okay. The central narrative is Charlie Kirk. The central counter narrative is the guy that looks like Beaker from the Muppets and can't stop jumping.
Innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West.
You've made that point, but
it's not a point, it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly through music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war, and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it, and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation in NC to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a...
Now, that is very well rehearsed, I guess. That was the entire official central narrative right there on the paragliding go-kart incident and everything that happened before and after. One of them is evil. One of them is good. The good one never gets credit for the good things it does, but it does always get blamed for the evil things it does. Isn't that weird that the good thing can only be seen as evil? Gosh, that's strange. Is there any admission that they do anything evil, that they do anything wrong at all, ever, Charlie? And, you know, we know Charlie Kirk's background on this stuff and his position on it. He does not believe, he believes that criticizing the government of Israel is somehow anti-Semitic and cannot be done. It's anti-American because he says America is just an idea. And so that same idea is Israel. And therefore, if you're not for Israel, you're not for America. Well, hey, Charlie, I don't think it's the idea that's the same. It's definitely not the same. To the extent that it is the same, it's only that the same controlling entity controls both Israel and America as far as we've ever known it, though not now. I would dispute all of those factual claims, okay? But if you are committed to the central narrative and you are in the party of false decorum and you have not explored the fact that maybe the paragliding go-kart incident wasn't as true as Charlie Kirk is pretending that it is, and that all the claims that he just made about all the atrocities, none of them are substantiated and have never been substantiated. There's always been argument about each and every point he just made, but he overrides it. He doesn't care. This is the story we put out. We put it out because it's the true story, even though people can see that it's not. And regardless, we have to be committed to that story because that's the only story. We can't argue outside that story. Well, hey, Charlie, what if, let's just say, what if paragliding go-karts with a year's advance notice weren't actually able to fly over the safest, most secured border in the history of the world? And it's so ridiculous that we would all immediately know it, but you're still pretending that it's true. Just like the Afghanistan plane as it gets dragged down the track from in front with the effeminate Afghan boys running by the sides and waving. We're still supposed to pretend that that's true. It's on equal footing with the paragliding go-kart incident. And we're supposed to pretend that all of this is true. Now, again, I'm not saying atrocities have never been committed against Jews, but the idea that we just have to accept the regime's narrative about Israel's 9/11, they called it Israel's 9/11. The idea that we have to accept that is silly. Let's close this out.
A good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Is that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that. Because
he's talking about the good guy and bad guy thing. He's saying, isn't that the morality of a child? Well, not necessarily.
A child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
A child that knows that Israel is good and Hamas is bad has a lot more knowledge than a student like yourself at Cambridge University. Hey, Charlie Kirk, you guys are both doing the same thing. It's the same thing. Charlie Kirk is telling one side of the controlled central narrative, and the guy that looks like Beaker from the Muppets and can't stop jumping is delivering the official counter narrative. That's what it is. There's nothing more beyond that. They both assume that one side or the other of all the news is right, and they've figured it out. And so now they are able to make this moral calculation. Israel is committing genocide. Israel has to do this because Hamas tried to genocide them. Give me a break. Imagine we believed still the official central narrative about 9/11. Do you believe it? I don't believe it. Most people don't believe it. Even people who say they believe it because they're scared of the sort of pushback they get for saying that they don't really believe it, they also don't believe it. People are not expressing generally their true beliefs all the time. We have to just come to terms with that. And, you know, it's all of us, okay? So I'm not trying to separate myself or saying those people do this. People don't always represent the things they actually truly believe. Sometimes they will hold those things back based on social incentives, and that's what the party of false decorum describes. Okay? But there are people who do that with 9/11. Imagine we still believed the central narrative about 9/11. That would be ridiculous. We would be precluding the possibility that we might be able to figure out problems like this and then move on from them. Okay? But we are being convinced to do that when it comes to the paragliding go-kart in this incident. And a lot of the time, we're being convinced to do it by people who call themselves truthers. Let us continue. It really should not be the case that that truthers are so consistently explaining why it's okay to lie or to abandon our principles or our epistemology about particular issues. That should not be a thing, and it is a thing. It's a constant thing. And that is to our detriment. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So, Wednesday afternoon, Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, very pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, pro-Judeo-Christianity, as though it's one thing. It's not one thing. Charlie Kirk goes viral for getting in an argument about more war in Palestine versus your killing us in genocide. Okay, those are the two sides. Charlie Kirk wants more war. He wants Israel to be extended the courtesy of being allowed to bomb whoever it wants forever. That's what Charlie Kirk is arguing for. He is just repeating the neocon line there, okay? And the counter argument is right on the other side. And it goes out all over the TV, like they schedule these things or something. And then later that evening, we get this. And this is an update from today about what happened Wednesday evening, but it's got the bullet points. So we're just going to go through this quickly. This is the Independent UK, Washington, D.C. shooting latest. Elias Rodriguez charged with first-degree murder of Israeli embassy couple. A suspect has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder after 2 Israeli embassy staffers, a couple who were about to become engaged, were gunned down Wednesday night outside of a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. You couldn't write a more horrific atrocity story than that one. Chicago man Elias Rodriguez, 30, chanted, "Free, free Palestine," according to police, after reportedly shooting at the couple at least 21 times. So did the police hear him say that? Did they interview other people that said he said that? How did the police get that the man was chanting "Free, free Palestine"? I would like to know. Maybe there's an answer. I haven't heard that answer. But assuming there were not crowds gathered around that waited for the police to come, and maybe there were. I mean, maybe it was crowded and a lot of people saw it. Totally possible, okay? Not denying the possibility. I'm just questioning this strange reporting. So the Chicago man, he is pro-Palestine, and he murdered this lovely Jewish couple about to get engaged outside a Jewish museum on Wednesday night. It's worth reminding everybody that on Sunday, we will have the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd and that whole George Floyd's quote unquote death, that whole thing. That was May 25th of 2020. So we are entering riot season. And I think that here we have Jewish George Floyd. And as I say that, I want to be clear that I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who have died here. Okay? There's a lot of terrible stuff that really does happen in this world, and we can feel sympathy for the people it happens to. All right? Understanding that in a different situation, it could have been us. All right? So we can appreciate that. We can understand the tragedy. But that's not all this is. Okay? Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were shot at 9:15 p.m. local time on Wednesday after leaving an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum focused on helping Gazans. Washington Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith said Rodriguez was seen pacing outside the venue before the attack, and afterwards tried to get inside the venue before being detained by security. It has since emerged that Rodriguez's father, Eric Rodriguez, was invited to President Donald Trump's joint address to Congress on March 5th by a Democrat lawmaker. President Trump immediately condemned the shooting as anti-Semitism, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he was shocked by the horrific anti-Semitic shooting. Okay. So the kid's father, the guy's father, I guess he's 30 years old, not a kid. The guy's father went to Trump's joint address to Congress as the invitee of a Democrat congresswoman or congressman. That's awfully strange. And the two people that got taken out were Israeli embassy staffers? Now, I guess that there's probably a lot of people at an event like that would have very interesting identities and interesting relationships, but this is certainly an interesting one. So the killer's father is connected to politics at a high level and respected enough or valued enough to be brought to that event and displayed to the world as allied with this Democrat congressperson. And then a couple of months later, his son goes and kills a Jewish couple who was about to be engaged outside a Jewish museum after an event focused on helping Gazans, which is what Benjamin Netanyahu told us is the purpose of him going in and controlling all of Gaza with his defense forces. He said, we're doing it so that Hamas doesn't hit these food lines with all this aid coming in, even though aid had been frozen by them. Guess they really didn't want to get it stolen. Okay, so just pieces here, okay? Let us continue. Now, we don't need to go too far into this, but I wanted to, so this is the article on who brought him, Congressman Garcia. Let me see. Chuy Garcia. Eric Rodriguez was our guest during the president's joint speech to Congress, but we don't know his family. Illinois Democratic Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia told the New York Post. So, Illinois Democratic Representative Chuy Garcia, how much do you want to bet that he is from Chicago? Let's find out. What does the machine say? Hold for processing. Man, ChatGPT is really taking its time today. Yes, he's closely associated with Chicago. Born April 12, 1956, in Durango, Mexico, he immigrated to the United States with his family in 1965, settling in Chicago's South Lawndale neighborhood, commonly known as Little Village. He's built his political career in Chicago, serving as Chicago City Council alderman, Illinois State Senator, and Cook County Commissioner before being elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018. All right. So a longtime resident and influential political figure in Chicago knows the killer's dad. How does it happen? How does it happen? All right. Let us now see Benjamin Netanyahu and his response to this incident.
For these neo-Nazis, Free Palestine is just today's version of Heil Hitler. They don't want a Palestinian state. They want to destroy the Jewish state. They want to annihilate the Jewish people who've been in the land of Israel for 3,500 years. I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust.
What was the Palestinian state before 83 years ago?
You won't be surprised to learn that Hamas thanked President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer and Carney for demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza immediately. Hamas was right to thank them, because by issuing their demand, replete with a threat of sanctions against Israel, not Hamas, these three leaders effectively said they want Hamas to remain in power. They want Israel to stand down and accept that Hamas's army of mass murderers will survive, rebuild, and repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again, because that's what Hamas is vowed to do. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
However bad we are, our enemies are worse. That's always the argument. And something so bad, an atrocity so atrocious, might happen in the future. And in order to do that, to prevent that, we are going to have to commit a series of atrocities. That's the argument. It's always the argument. The argument and it's an argument that is very effective, by the way. They've used it very effectively, I should say, convincing us of all these various existential threats. This thing could be done by some other country. It would be so bad that we need to do anything, no matter how immoral and corrupt, in order to stop it. Well, what if the people asking for the money, the power, and the control made up the threat? That they're telling you have to give them more money, more power, more control in order to prevent. What if they made it up? Well, then, the threat doesn't exist. And therefore, all of the heinous, immoral shit they're doing to prevent that threat is actually being done for another reason. And that's how we've seen the global regime operate for decades, for centuries, probably for millennia. So I guess that there's some interest on listing Canada and the UK and France as not being properly aligned in this situation. He's trying to put pressure on them. Is it going to work? Doubt it. But it's a narrative op. It's a plan. Maybe they'll be pressured into making certain statements here or there. Maybe he thinks that they might come in and actually take Israel's side or give Israel more opportunity to expand the war. Whatever it is, it's going to backfire on all of those parties. So we can just observe it. But we've gone from, in a span of 5 days, we've gone from J.D. Vance not going because Israel's not doing the things they want, or because that Trump wants, or because Trump does not want J.D. Vance to go have his picture taken with Netanyahu right after the story runs that Netanyahu wants to expand the war effort in Gaza, because then the Trump administration's, optically at least, part of that. Okay? And so they would not want that sort of thing. The next day, Trump comes out, says he doesn't want any of that, and he wants the war to stop, not expand. He wants it to stop. And so we get a few days of argument over that. Has Trump abandoned Israel? Has Trump abandoned Israel? Then we see a televised event where the two sides of the central narrative, the two sides of the controlled opposition dynamic within the central narrative about Israel and Palestine would be argued and then sent as content to everyone. If you are adamantly pro-Israel, like if you're confused about the biblical Israel thing, or you are, I guess, probably a lot of Jewish people, if you are of that mindset, then you will think that Charlie Kirk was just saying all the right things to this person who was saying the wrong things. But there's no reason to view it that way. Okay, that's just bias. What we witnessed was two sides of the controlled opposition dynamic arguing the same case that Netanyahu is trying to make. Okay, we need more war. That's what the neocons want. And so we had the for and against. That's what that debate was. It wasn't one guy saying the right things and protecting the good people, and the other guy saying the bad things and protecting the bad people because he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what it is. It's two sides of the controlled opposition dynamic being delivered. And so then, after that, to close the cycle, Netanyahu comes out. Well, then we have the killing, right? Which tells everybody Jewish people are being hunted by the Free Palestine people. And then we have Netanyahu come out and say that all of this is anti-Semitism. And look at this atrocity. This is why you need us to expand this war. That is a sales pitch, okay? That's a sales pitch. And whatever sadnesses have occurred within the real events, or within these events to the extent that any of them are real, okay? And I'm not, again, suggesting no kinetic action has happened, and I'm not suggesting no one's been hurt, okay? At any point, I'm not suggesting that. What I am saying is that this is a playbook. This is a narrative playbook. You can see the purpose of the playbook. You can watch the steps as they play out. And it always leads back to the same place. Whatever the regime wants is what must be done. The regime wants more war. We must have more war. The regime wants both sides of the controlled opposition dynamic to represent the opinions of everyone so that everyone out there can choose Coke or Pepsi, right? Charlie Kirk is Coke. The tweaker who looks like Beaker is Pepsi. And you're just doing the cola wars. It's just two sides of a controlled opposition dynamic. If the same company were to own Coke and Pepsi, it would be so obvious to see what they were doing. Just divide you into two camps. The fact that you are fighting over this totally ridiculous opinion about some shit that ain't even real, that pushes it pushes people to line up on one side or another, and it pushes the underlying goal, which is to get you to buy soda. All right. So with that in mind, I was kind of thinking through all of this yesterday, and I was posting it as I went along. And I eventually decided I'm just going to write this up into one piece in Substack. And I haven't actually published writing on Substack in quite a long time. So it was something that I meant to get back to doing, and I'm glad that I did do it. I would like to share that piece with you and go through it, and I'm just going to read through it. And I don't think I'm going to pause. My plan is not to pause, but I guess I might. But I just want to read through this. So it's like 3 or 4 pages long. It could take 10 minutes or so. So I'm not going to be checking the chat or anything. Just going to do this. The piece in the Substack, and again, the Substack is imyourmoderator.substack.com. The piece is called "The Point is Not Getting Hoodwinked at All." And that picture right there, you might recognize from the movie The Matrix. That is the character Cypher when he is at a dinner meeting within the Matrix with Agent Smith. And that steak is part of the Matrix, but he can't tell the difference. And he's sick of fighting on the outside. So he just wants to go back and join the Matrix again. He wants to re-engage in the incentive structure of the Matrix, and he's willing to betray the entire cause in order to do it. Okay? And I think that is a wonderful scene. I mean, the Matrix is a wonderful movie, and it's all so very relevant. But that scene in particular, I think is profound, and so I included it here. If you have changed your opinion on Israel and Gaza based on the reported anti-Semitic killing, then you are exactly the sort of sucker these narrative events target. Are we to pretend that these are the sorts of narrative events that are only false flags sometimes? Who are we, truthers, to think only some things are false flags, and only we, because of our state of supposed enlightenment, can tell which ones are, while the rest of the time the TV is telling us the truth? Too many people have adopted the belief that because they support Republicans and are therefore on the right side of things, all the false flags and psyops are targeting someone else. Supporting Republicans means you already fell for it. It's a uniparty. Democrat and Republican, left and right, red and blue, are both trying to hoodwink people for the same reason, ultimately. If you have spent your life obeying them, then you have been hoodwinked. We have all been hoodwinked before. Shall we assume they're only hoodwinking the other side because they know we initiated, can already see through it, so they've stopped trying to pull one over on us? False flags and psyops come from no side but that of the regime and the uniparty in this country. But they target absolutely everyone. The regime brands false flags and psyops to Republicans, just as they do with Democrats, or however you choose to break it down. Ideas are marketed to everyone all at once. Every message says, you'll get a treat if you convince other people to support us. The regime provides daily confirmations that supporting them will be handsomely rewarded and opposing them will be harshly punished, eventually leading to ruin. The point is not knowing for certain we're only getting hoodwinked by the good guys and therefore immune. The point is not getting hoodwinked at all. When you understand what it means not to get hoodwinked at all, only God remains. The point is not getting hoodwinked at all. If everything in reality has simply returned to the status quo ante down every avenue, did anything even happen? It's one massive psyop. No part of the psyop has to be true, and every part is designed to deceive someone, or if it's moral, to simply tell directly or elicit the truth. Everyone would understand this if the admission of this obvious and necessary truth didn't cause such horror upon the thought that there are, in reality, so few we know telling it. Whatever group is marketing, whatever event, to whatever demographic, the official narrative and the official counter-narrative are disseminated by the same regime as always, just under a different identity with a different set of characteristics. Does the regime market to whites, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, homos, transformers, men, women, commies, neocon commies, MAGA, MAHA, conservatives, liberals, Christians, Jews, Muslims, yoga, scientists, spacemen, Bitcoiners, shitcoiners, no coiners, gold bugs, young, old, boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, moviegoers, football fans, Taylor Swift fans, soap opera fans, only fans, rich, poor, healthy, sick, happy, depressed, hoodwinked, not hoodwinked, in quotes? Yes, of course. The regime markets to everyone. It's why they create legitimately nonstop entertainment, so every group gets good and hoodwinked. The point is not getting hoodwinked at all. And then the picture here shows the cover of the New Republic last June when they released the American Fascism issue featuring Trump as Hitler, with all of these different writers contributing their dystopian versions of a future that would come to pass if Trump is, quote unquote, reelected and we have brought this Hitler to power. Continuing. There was an assassination during the Havara negotiations in 1933. Zionist versus Zionist. Weird, no? Maybe it's not weird. I mean, regime media does keep trying to sell the re-envisioning of Trump as Hitler and his MAGA supporters as Nazis, a total inversion within the false reality. Should we think this isn't the controlled opposition dynamic between Zionists and allies of other backgrounds, who think Trump is Hitler on one side and the Zionists and allies of other backgrounds, who stand accused of appeasing Hitler on the other? It's the same playbook. It just isn't working this time. Consider, what if it didn't work last time? So in response, the regime just started eliminating people by sending them to die in wars they themselves started and profited from. And then they told us the same story they're telling us now. Does anyone really believe the story that Trump is Hitler? The people on the side of the regime, in all its many forms and identities, believe this absurdity harder than anyone and harder than ever before. The explanation that followed the assassination of Chaim Arlosoroff, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, that it was a random crime by Arab assailants, wasn't believed by anyone. There's no question it was a Zionist on Zionist political hit, and you can look into the regime's own official story of Havara, the transfer agreement by Jewish Zionist Edwin Black, for lengthy proof of this. A bonus hoodwinking. The insertion into the narrative of the potential explanation that no one ever believed makes people categorize the event as questionable, causing them to avoid confronting what the true explanation would mean about the rest of the context in which the event occurred. Isn't it amazing that Charlie Kirk, in one of those college kids he debates, see Ben Shapiro in 2015, went viral arguing pro-militant Zionism versus free Palestine, and then a few short hours later, free Palestine murdered innocent Zionists, therefore militant Zionism is necessary? Therefore, militant Zionism is necessary, and people in stupor nod along. It's like the regime scripts and schedules these narrative events, and of course they do. Both sides have been fully activated online. Now you're forced to choose one side or the other, unless you choose neither. When you choose neither, the trick stops working. But people recoil from this, certain the television must be telling the truth this time. Many truthers argue that it's okay to lie to the people, as long as we're doing it for the right reasons, while we remain infuriated that the other side does exactly that. They claim their lies are justified because they are in the right. We truthers say we'll stop lying and defending the lies of others once it's safe to tell the truth again, or once we've been given permission by the television. But it will never be okay to tell the truth. That's why so few people actually do. What's required is everyone doing it. Imagine, Christians, if Jesus said, it's okay to lie if you're supporting the right political party, or just lying to people in order to wake them up based on things you saw online. And repeat, in order to convince strangers to like you. Imagine Jesus said that. If someone is lying to you, that person is probably not doing so with the intent to wake you up. And the fact that they pretend to be trying is them lying to themselves. If they say they're lying as part of some plan, whose plan is it? Is it God's plan? Is it a plan we can truly claim to understand? Why would we lie on behalf of a plan we don't fully understand? God was not the one who said, you have figured it out well enough. Now you are free to lie when you determine it's for a good reason. The truth is what wakes people up. The truth is of God. But what if we're told the truth and we don't listen? What if we prioritize our worldly interests as the reason to avoid the truth this time in this situation? What is our moral relativism, if not the problem? Truth can be communicated to the public as soon as the public can accept it. People are still not willing to accept it. I would suggest this is a consequence of unrelenting psyops, for which the purpose is to cause us to reject the truth in favor of our worldly interests, money, jobs, status, sex. The public will not accept the truth because they are constantly being lied to. All of it is a lie. All of it must be let go so we can build back from there. That requires people who know the truth to speak the truth. Since we cannot force others to tell the truth or coerce them to tell the truth on the basis of some reward, we must commit ourselves to speaking the truth and abstain from believing and supporting the lies. If we are prepared to accept the truth or to speak the truth, we will be treated accordingly. We will continue to be treated like children for as long as we are incapable of responding otherwise. We are inching closer to a revelatory moment. Most of us understand that everything about us has become data and been compiled within the machine. The machine watches us. It selects what we see. The machine speaks to us. It hears what we say. It even reads the messages we delete. The machine knows where we are and who we are with. Anything it doesn't access directly, the machine gets from somewhere else. Our doctor's office, our bank, the censorship agencies, the IRS, all of this exists together inside the machine. Our online dossier, cybernetically attached to each one of us. There are no invulnerable systems. Then all systems, if there are no invulnerable systems, then all systems are vulnerable. And that seems to be the case. Since the systems are vulnerable and have been vulnerable, it's reasonable to assume that the systems have been exploited. And of course, we know they have. In false flag hacking events, quote unquote. Every few months, we receive another message about how and where our data may have become compromised in a quote unquote hack. If the systems that feed the machine are vulnerable and have been exploited, then we can safely assume that all of the data held by the machine will be exploited. The nuclear option would be to dump it all online, public and free for anyone to see, and watch the social crisis engulf everything. But perhaps it would not. Perhaps we would not want to participate in the tearing of ourselves apart. The success of this project, and I believe that's what it is, depends on all of us coming to accept the truth of ourselves, and that is that we are fallen. We are sinners. The solution to sin is repentance and living according to God's grace, doing the work God has to each of us assigned. To come to terms with ourselves is to forgive others. How can we condemn them for doing that which we ourselves are capable of doing or have perhaps done? If the truth of all of it can be known, it will be known. Beneath the fear, the shame, the embarrassment, and the regret is also God, because fear, shame, embarrassment, and regret are part of the hoodwinking. And beyond that, God is. The point is not getting hoodwinked at all. All right. So I think that lays it out rather succinctly. I hope it does. But the point, as we have talked about for a very long time, is not getting hoodwinked at all. Okay? The way to not get hoodwinked at all is to not believe anything on authority just because the powerful people are saying it and tell you that you're going to be rewarded if you say it too, or we and everyone else, from the perspective of the regime, will punish you if you go against it. And that's what we have in the public square these days. That is the party of false decorum. Okay? There are all these incentives to support the regime, to support the machine, to support the agenda. There are all these incentives. The better you support the system, the more you grovel, the more you can be corrupted, the more you can be compromised. As long as you are valuable to someone, higher up than you, that person will keep pulling you up, and you will ascend the rungs in the ladder of the party of false decorum as long as you continue doing that. All the incentives are for supporting the regime, for supporting that system, for eschewing morality and any talk of morality in favor of what is going to get the right things done in this world for those systems of power, to please those systems of power. And those systems of power are not God. We should not be doing things for them in order to please them, but we are because of the incentives. And then on the flip side of that, there are the punishments. You can be punished for publicly going against Israel, okay? And it's less true right now, maybe, than it was before, depending on how you're going after Israel. Because there is, again, a whole movement on the other side. That is, and I mean the other side from us, the regime side, there is a controlled opposition dynamic. And on one side of that controlled opposition dynamic is not only the tweaker who looks like Beaker, who debated Charlie Kirk, but also the pro-Nazi op that is trying to be friends with MAGA, okay? Those are part of the same anti-Israel controlled opposition. They're not outside the controlled opposition. They are the controlled opposition. And so right now, because that's within the controlled opposition, the pro-Nazi thing, it is generally more acceptable. The punishments have been reduced for saying anti-Israel things because those things are not anti-Israel in a way that hurts them. Those things are anti-Israel in a way that helps them sell the narrative that Trump is Hitler and MAGA are Nazis. Okay? And so once that happens, the punishment side of things will be reinstituted. Right now, it's all incentives. Say the thing for us, support our side, and you will be handsomely rewarded. Go against us, and right now, you're not going to be punished that much. But oh boy, later, if you stay on that side, and none of those conning people in the pro-Nazi op are going to stay on that side, they're just going to get out, and they're going to blame it on somebody else. That's what's going to happen. And then who's going to be left holding the bag? The people outside the controlled opposition. That's the point, okay? That's the point of the narrative. That's the point of the playbook. That's what they're trying to do. And so if we are sticking within the party of false decorum, if we're sticking inside the controlled opposition dynamic and not getting outside of it, this is what we're going to continue having. And people are not getting outside of it because they are pleased with the incentives that are offered, okay? They want to look serious to all the serious conservatives they've supported all their lives, right? You'll notice much of the time in the truth community, it's people who are still blind to the neocon thing. They think they've been right enough the entire time. They used to vote for the Republican establishment. They tell themselves now that John McCain and Mitt Romney were better than Barack Obama in some important way, that George W. Bush was better in some important way than Al Gore and John Kerry. Is that true? Is that true? If it's not true, then what do they get any credit for? But they're allowed to say, because it still works in the controlled opposition dynamic, D versus R. Well, yeah, they're not great, but the other side was worse. Same argument again. Same argument it always is. Same argument you heard Netanyahu make earlier. And so those people went from supporting establishment Republicans in the 2015-2016 primary cycle to continuing to support establishment Republicans and Trump. And then when Trump left, some of them kept supporting, but much more mildly. And they would say that he really lost the election. They would make excuses and try to come up with different ways to explain Joe Biden's 81 million real lawful American votes. And it would never make sense. And they took the primary seriously in this last cycle. And yes, they supported Trump. And then as soon as Trump got elected, they went right back to supporting the Republican establishment and worrying about midterms and the rest of it. Those people don't believe they've been wrong at any point. They believe even being wrong about the neocons and even being wrong about these past Republican politicians, that they were wrong in a lesser way than these other people were wrong. And besides, everybody else was wrong with them, right? That's nothing. That's nothing. That's the same thing that we already had before. That's just people supporting the Republican establishment. That is just people groveling for the uniparty right because they want to access the power of the uniparty right and that particular political set who they see as the people in power who must be pleased. Okay? That's the purpose of it. And so when we are looking at this op and when we are looking at how people are handling all of this, consider the false flag events that we've known about in the past. Some of them are quite obvious false flags and scams and hoaxes. Remember how quickly all of these people identified all of the trans school shooters and the transformer who shot up that bar in Colorado or whatever. They knew right away that those were false flags set up by intel organizations. Again, could be that real people were killed. There's a lot more going on there. And those things are constructed for a reason. Those events are constructed for a reason. Don't even have to be real. But even assuming that they are, they're constructed for a reason. And then the regime tries to sell its agenda along all these lines on which it was already trying to sell its agenda. Okay? So they want to get rid of guns, school shooting, bar shooting, school shooting, gay nightclub shooting. You got to get rid of the guns. Every time immediately, you got to get rid of the guns. And if the shooter is a MAGA right-wing extremist or something, then the whole story is about how that guy is an example of how dangerous all of MAGA is and all of Trump and his supporters are together. Okay? They're the Nazis, remember? But when it's the other way around, we have to pretend that the event is totally real and spontaneous. And real as the television describes. Well, it really was a Free Palestine screaming shooter who really did kill 2 Jewish people. And, therefore, that is an example of just how awful Hamas is. Therefore, we need to give these people the power and leeway to bomb and kill whoever they want indiscriminately for as long as they need to. And if they need to go to other places and do it, okay. Last week it was all about how Israel is prepared to strike Iran. We talked about that on Monday. They want the justification. They're getting the justification. That's what the sales pitch is for. It's just the neocon playbook. It's the same as it's always been. It's not a different thing. It's just that thing. Let us move forward. Take a little pause and look in the chats over on Substack and YouTube and see how everything's going. Hope everything's going well. Oh, man. It's making it impossible to find my current. Oh, man. I just realized that I am not. Stupid. I forgot to send this to YouTube. Very dumb. I will have to replay this. I'll restream it on YouTube maybe tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to watch again and participate in another chat, I don't know why you would want to do that with a 2 or 3 hour show, but hey, man, be my guest. All right. So with all of that in mind, and separate from the Israeli stuff, I'm not trying to pin what I'm about to talk about to the Israeli stuff, only to the differentiation of truth, the observance of the PSYOPs, our commitment to be consistent in how we're discerning, and ultimately the understanding that the end of all of this has to be God. Everything up to that is also a faith-based belief, but nobody thinks it's so. Everybody thinks that their beliefs about the world are something that they have gleaned from the world and not faith-based beliefs. They are all faith-based beliefs premised on your understanding of reality being correct. Okay? I don't believe that my understanding of reality is correct. I am fascinated and mystified by the state of our reality, and I am becoming more fascinated and mystified by the state of our reality at all times. And so down those avenues, leaving the Israeli stuff aside, I would like to talk about Shawn Ryan's interview of Lieutenant General retired Stephen Kwast. Okay. Many of you know that General Kwast has been our biggest supporter over at Badlands, and he's been very kind and supportive to me in particular. One of the joys of getting to go to our GART events, beyond meeting the people, beyond seeing the guys, beyond the panels, beyond any of that, something that I can just say that I think all of us on the team, like personally really enjoy, is getting to spend time and interact with General Kwast. And there are obviously some others like Colonel Oakland McCulloch, or McCulloch, I don't want to say that incorrectly. I suppose I've never said it out loud to him, so I don't actually know which way he says it. But it's been such an honor and been so wonderful to engage and interact with people like that and to know that we have their support. And so General Kwast went on to Shawn Ryan's show for about a 3-hour and 10-minute episode. And there is more packed into that episode than you could ever possibly imagine. I probably will not. You should still listen to it no matter what. I'm going to play a bunch of clips, okay? It'll probably be 15 or 20 minutes worth of clips, but that's still 15 or 20 minutes out of 3 hours plus. And Shawn Ryan, one of the good things you can say about his show is that he will allow his guest all the room that they generally need. And sometimes there are good ways to interview when you're not doing that. But when you're with a guy like General Kwast, I think that it's a good strategy, because this interview is just all about the general laying out what our future looks like, what our commitments are, what the purpose of truth is, the communications, and where we are going in technology. And so I want to share many bits of that with you, and let us start here.
It's like shining a flashlight on all the dark corners of history and of the world right now where evil can hide. Mm-hmm. They can enslave people. They can traffic people. They can launder money. The corruption can thrive in the dark corners. But if we believe there are more people on the planet that are good and would rather love their neighbor than kill their neighbor, we can gang up on this small number of evil people that are prioritizing their own control, their own money, and their own security by enslaving others. And this is why it's personal for me, because I got to see this in Africa and the tribe I grew up in. The African continent has been enslaved, and the hero system has been crushed and crippled. And it continues to be crippled as tyrants and despots keep the people of Africa enslaved with a lack of information, with weaponizing the economy, both electricity, food, and water. And the moment we can provide a device for people in my tribe to be able to see the truth that's going on around them and bypass those that control the information systems, they can now start organizing and throwing off these shackles of slavery. But I would tell you, my study of history and technology and human nature and this lens I have been blessed with by growing up in one culture without Western influence and then coming to a culture in Los Angeles of not only Western prosperity, but also the corruption of the gangs and the drugs and all the other things that were in the underbelly of that LA society that I went into. I will tell you that we truly do have the potential of throwing this off, and that the good people of this world have access to truth, and they can organize and throw this corruption into the prisons or into the trash heap of history. It will never go away totally because there will always be evil people. Mm-hmm. But this is why I say it is so damn exciting to be alive today, because we are in the middle of an epic change. Mm-hmm. And most epic changes are riddled with violence and destruction, like going from the kingdoms and the serfdoms into the industrial age. And the industrial age and World War I and World War II into the information age. We have a leader in President Trump that is trying to usher in a change where the American people are not lied to anymore by people that want to maintain control. That we revive the economy to build a golden age, truly by unleashing these innovations that have been snuffed out and quenched and thrown a blanket on because of the military-industrial congressional complex of lobbyists lying to congressional members, and congressional members fearful of their political future, taking money into their coffers of election and ignoring the technology because they're not willing to stand up to their people and say there's a better way. We can shine a light on all this corruption. And it's amazing how the spirit of innovation and renewal and revival and even forgiveness can be ushered in with information that's in the pocket of every human being on the planet.
I mean, there's not much to add to that just because he's so eloquent in expressing these things. But the one thing that I want to focus on in that clip is what he refers to as the hero system, right? We need to have these examples of the ways that things could be done and see people giving examples of various forms of heroism, no matter how big or small, so that we can emulate those good things and summon the courage to do them, knowing what the punishments are. And I think that he always states that so brilliantly. For those who don't know, General Kwast lived in many places over the course of his life, but he spent considerable time as a child in Africa. And as he said, you could hear him talking a bit about LA there as well. So he's experienced totally divergent cultures and seems to have learned many lifetimes worth knowledge about and wisdom about how culture operates and where we need to go. Let us continue with the clips here and go to this one.
But there's another thing that goes on, and I have personal experience on this, and it's this sense of belonging. I mean, we are creatures that belong to one another. We are moral creatures that belong to God, and we belong to one another. That's why we have tribes, like the tribe I grew up in, and our loyalties to our sports team, to your unit. We would live and die for our sense of belonging. And if the sense of survival were more powerful than the sense of belonging, nobody would jump on a hand grenade in a foxhole for their brothers. But they do, because they feel that sense of belonging so powerfully that I would die for you. And we do it in the military all the time. And it is a beautiful thing. And it's what God gave us, a sense of belonging. But even something good like that can be used by Satan for bad. And, but it also can be a trap.
So this sense of belonging, this is something that humans need. You can say that they require it. Certainly people seek it out and try to develop that sense of belonging no matter what circles they're in, unless they're, totally introverted and really want to be left alone, which I totally get. But the sense of belonging is important and it's good unless it can be hijacked and exploited. And that's what he's talking about. And that is what we have. And that's a really key element of the party of false decorum construct. Okay. People are responding to social incentives. They want to feel that sense of belonging. Therefore, if you can figure out how to trigger them and influence them and manipulate them emotionally based on their ability to retain that sense of belonging, you can get people to act in pretty awful ways. And if you have convinced a society at large to be acting in many awful ways, and the sense of belonging exists within the realm of people who are willing to act that way and not call it out, well, it's going to be pretty hard to develop a sense of belonging if you're not the kind of person who wants to act in those ways. And so that's the struggle I think that we have as people who are trying in every way they're capable of to tell the truth. Christians, people who are experiencing this awakening, who haven't gotten to that point yet. The sense of belonging is important, but it can be totally hijacked. And in many ways, it has been hijacked. You can see it and the consequences of that online every day, including from people who are on, quote unquote, our side. And it's important. And, again, not that we're not all susceptible to it. We certainly are. But as someone who had 5,000 acquaintances and they were all my friend, and from saying a series of true things ended up with about 40 of them, I can tell you that, the sense of belonging can be found elsewhere. Oh, man. And it can just be found within yourself, by the way. So, and I mean, because of your relationship with God, not because you're obsessed with yourself and you're into that kind of narcissistic mode that we see way too often in our society now. All right, let us continue with more General Kwast. If I can just remember. There we are. So we talked about the hero system, and now General Kwast describes the hero.
Nothing new under the sun, and everything is rooted in human nature. So if you understand human nature and culture and history and the lessons that have happened, as long as the history is true, that's another thing you have to work for, you can navigate a better future. But it requires this intellectual curiosity and aggressive learning where you actually put in the time to study your history. And you triangulate truth with that too. You read history books written from different people in different perches around the world, different cultures around the world, to try to get after the bias that is written by the victors. Because the victors always write it, making themselves look like they are the heroes of the world, when in reality they may not have been totally. Mm-hmm. And you have to be honest with yourself about not wanting to be the hero of the story.
Pausing for a second, and then we'll continue. But what he just described right there is the same phenomenon and dynamic that I was describing in an article that you can find on the Substack called The Sides of History. Okay. And we're going to talk about this a couple more times in his comments to come.
Truth is the hero of the story.
I mean, I'm just curious, how are you dealing with that, with what we just talked about? I mean, these are some pretty outlandish claims in your speech. I mean, and then I looked into your background and we were like, no, like this guy is 100% legit. But they are some outlandish claims that just go right over the top of people's heads.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how do you deal with that, with everything that you're doing?
The first thing is to, be humble enough to anchor yourself in the fact that the only person that matters is God. And if you don't have that, if you aren't grounded in the fact that you are moral, ethical, legal, honest, and God is your judge, and you can't lie to God, you can't deceive God, and then you surround yourself with people that keep you honest and keep you humble, where it's not about you, okay? It's about God's will. It's about glorifying God, ultimately. That's that moral center, where our worldview is that there is a God, and that God loves us, and he asks us to love one another as much as he loves us. So if you have that as a grounding, you can weather all of this stuff. You know, when I was at the senior level of command and supporting the Space Force as an astronautical engineer, and through my whole life watching this technology emerge and able to see the consequences of what this was going to mean for the art of peace, to have strength to prevail for American interests as the economy of space starts emerging, and then being considered a traitor because what is a fighter pilot doing talking about space? And the Air Force did not, just like the Army did not want an independent Air Force for the same reasons why the Air Force did not want a Space Force. And so, you know, I was not welcome. And that's okay. That is the cost of innovation. And if you're not grounded in God and the you know, look at Job in the Bible, you know, even his family and his friends abandoned him, and all he had was God. And oftentimes Job was like, why are you doing this, God? And it was, you know, he couldn't see this, but it was because an entire generation that was going to come after Job could see that as long as you cling to God, you can weather anything. You cannot torture me. You cannot torture you cannot do anything to me. You can never steal away my sense of value and worth for God. And I do this though, you know, I could just shut up and be quiet and go along to get along, or just not be a part of the fray. But I truly believe that if the spirit of fighting for God's will is in us, God will usher in a new age. He will forgive us, and he will, because God wants more people going to heaven. And if we are so corrupt as a human race that the game is up, then God will come home again and it'll be over. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if we can usher in a better future, the golden age, and I believe it's biblical, I think it's prophetic, more people will be in heaven because more people will be born and will be prosperous, healthy, and secure. And we have the creativity. God has given us the brains to create our future, to build it. We don't have to be victims of other people building it. And this Constitution that America has is the best hope of humanity. And with my relationships across the globe, from my time in the military and the foreign countries that I became friends with, and my cultural understanding, having been raised in a different country, all the other countries of the world are just looking at America going, I hope President Trump succeeds, mm-hmm. because if he doesn't succeed, we're all screwed.
Yeah.
If he doesn't succeed, we're all screwed. Okay, what's the project? Ushering in the golden age. Part of the ushering in of the golden age is going to be the revelation of this new technology that allows us to communicate and transmit energy and the rest of it, okay? Because we are embracing, potentially, I think, a different reality, and understanding that our physical reality and that the world as we've known it throughout our lifetimes is not exactly right, okay? It's not exactly what we thought it was. Now, General Kwast, a lot of people have brought up to me that he's got some views about cosmology, for instance, the space stuff, that people might not align with, okay? And I get it. Some of the stuff about quantum computing and the rest of it, the idea that that's being done by science and technology, we talked about this on Wednesday in regard to Ether and 6G and the rest of these technologies that will be coming up. All these things are kind of part of the same whole. And it might just be a realization that our external reality is not what we thought it was before. Some people are going to interpret that as a change in the physical world that they need to understand through science. Some other people will interpret that as a change in our understanding of the physical world, which elicits a spiritual response in us and a new spiritual understanding. And I think that that's going to ultimately be key. But at the bottom of all of this, he says, the truth is the hero of the story. The way to the future we want is through the truth. All right? You can't come to it another way. It's like you can't get to God without going through Jesus Christ. Okay? Same kind of thing. The truth has to be part of the way ahead. And so to reiterate again, the point I was making in the written piece on Substack, believing that you have been given permission, okay, or that you have been assigned to be the person on the side of the plan that is lying for a good reason, knowing that you don't know the plan, that's not the truth. That is not trying to figure out the truth. That is trying to say, I'm certain that I'm right because I live in this privileged class of people who are right. I'm just going to have to trick you guys into getting what the people in the plan want accomplished. And last year, one of the best examples of this all last year was all the people out there saying, vote hard, vote hard, vote hard. Why? Because they wanted to win a fake election. They wanted to, quote unquote, win a fake election. So vote as hard as possible. Everybody needs to vote. We need to pay lots of money to register people to vote. We need all the votes. We need to harvest votes. We need to chase ballots. We need to do all this stuff. We're going to vote as hard as possible. That's how we're going to win. And at no point did they tell people, hey, your elections are fake and rigged, and elections are not going to be what fixes things in this country. It turns out elections don't fix things. These things were coming regardless. The election wasn't real. Trump has the people's mandate. The rest of the government is nonsense. Telling people that they need to go do something that they don't believe in, and you pretending that really it's something other than it is, that's not telling the truth. Okay? The truth is the hero of the story. We know where we're going at the end. We should be able, we actually have to, it's a necessity to be focused on the truth along the entire journey to that end. All right? Now, people will say that some deceptions are necessary. And they'll say things like, the FBI has to keep that information secret because otherwise XYZ is going to happen. Okay, well, I mean, maybe. Or maybe you are just accepting an explanation that the system has given you to protect itself, and you are amenable to their explanation. You've been convinced by their argument. No, we can't let you know what's going on this time because there are these other interests involved. So yes, unfortunately, we have to lie or we have to withhold, but it's for a higher purpose. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Let's continue. I thought this is a little bit off the subject we were just talking about, but there's something very subtle here that General Kwast says that I don't want to miss.
Ways of building a piece of technology that requires such low energy to still give you the information you need without having to be a slave to an outlet.
Man.
But that takes time because the investment in all of this technology that is in the pocket of every person takes time to evolve and then move into a marketplace that's new. Because you first need that new source of energy, and then people start buying different devices.
You're also a disruptor.
And that's dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why, for both of these companies, Genesis Systems and Space Built, we've been in stealth mode until we felt like we were strong enough to come out because the attacks and the biggest risk is our government.
What a shame.
That is the best low energy to still give you.
Wait, sorry. I just messed that up because I wanted to pause for a second. But he just said we've been in stealth mode, and the U.S. government is their biggest adversary.
Companies, Genesis Systems and Spacebuilt, we've been in stealth mode until we felt like we were strong enough to come out because the attacks and the biggest risk is our government.
What a shame.
That is the biggest risk. It's not, these companies will adapt to it and they will buy it and invest in it if they see that it gives them a future revenue stream. But the government will say, we're going to shut you down and do a study for 10 years as other countries beat you to the punch.
Now, I mean, he said what he said. Surface interpretation of what he said totally applies. But I think that there is another kind of, I don't want to say metaphorical, but maybe that's the right word. Another way to look at that. They've been in stealth mode for a long time, developing all of these technologies. What does stealth mode means? It means that other people don't know what they're doing. And gosh, man, he sounds like he's been kind of on the ground floor of this work for quite a long time. The company's been in stealth mode because of all the potential attacks. And the biggest risk is our own government to all that work. And yes, he's talking about business investments for technological developments and how we can get there. But again, we're talking about the two sides here. It's not how the regime describes them to us. It's good twin, evil twin, top down, centralized control over everything versus decentralized, fragmented, sovereign leaders in sovereign nations for sovereign people who try to be their own sovereigns. That is the contest. So he is clearly claiming the side of the decentralized and fragmented. And the opposition to that is the centralization and in the person of our government. Let us continue.
Start by telling you what I think is the ultimate outcome of quantum for me. It is the evidence of God. And it's the evidence of the fact that we totally misunderstand and do not know even the beginnings of the complexity of the universe we live in. That God has created us with such infinite complexity, connected with the universe and our inner and our interior life, our relationship with God and with one another, that we are, again, we're like children crawling around, not even being aware of the world we're in. Einstein was, right when he said, this theory of relativity that I'm giving you is wrong, but it's the best I can do in my lifetime to at least explain a small sliver of what we observe in reality, but it's totally wrong. And we know that now. So having said that for me, this is the evidence of God, and it may explain a lot of the things that people see that they can't explain. Okay. And I'll just describe, in fact, something everybody can read if they want to be aggressive about learning about quantum. Read about quantum computing. Read about quantum sensing. Read about quantum communication. And here's what we observe. We don't know why this happens, and we don't know how it happens. Just think of a caveman, the first caveman that observed fire that started from electricity, from a lightning bolt. He didn't know how it happened. He didn't know why it happened, but he knew it happened. And he knew that there was something dangerous about that because it burned up the tree, but it gave him heat. And he was fascinated. How can I use this to make my life better? And look where we've come. Okay. That's the stage we're at with quantum. It's like we have just seen a lightning bolt start a fire, and we can observe what's happening and some of the effects of that, but we have no clue why or how.
So we are like children in our understanding of our reality. And it, again, is the ultimate mystery and remains a mystery, no matter how much the scientists tell us they've figured it out, it remains a mystery, and he notes the mysteriousness of it. Now, quantum is kind of a fraught term and has been over many years. It's kind of controversial. There is one school of thought that says all these people talking about quantum have no idea about quantum and don't know what they're talking about. And then, of course, there are the physicists and all the people who tell us this is what quantum is. It can do all these things. And General Kwast, I think, understands fully the positions of both sides. And he's talking about the quantum stuff. And I don't know if all of this should be taken literally or in some sense metaphorically, because we are, as I said, going to need an explanation for what our physical reality, for what the perception of our physical reality has become. Okay? We're going to have this shift in perception. We're going to realize this is not what we thought it was. What is it? Well, here's the scientific explanation for what's happening. This tells you a story about how the devices are going to be. They're going to communicate this way through this physics thing, and we're going to be able to do all of these extraordinary things that General Kwast describes throughout this interview. It's a lot. So if we are like children in our understanding, and we need to be communicated to as children so that we can be met where we are, is that a reason to use metaphor, to use narrative, to use euphemisms? And, you know, I think that there's some argument to be made for that. And that's not the same thing as not telling the truth. If you are eliciting a truth and meeting someone where they are so that they can understand the truth that you are telling, then maybe we have a different scenario. For instance, Jesus spoke in parables so that people could embrace the mystery of what he's saying and these kind of higher questions, and then engage through that story form. People are going to have different thoughts about that. I thought it was very interesting, though, that he's talking about the discovery of fire by cavemen as being roughly the same as the moment we are currently embracing, the moment that is quickly coming upon us. That is extraordinary. Continuing on, we have a few more clips of the general.
For whatever reason, you have invested in probably the most important thing that we need as a human race. And I know that you're probably also bombarded with people trying to influence what you say and what you do and preventing you from telling the truth, or triangulating truth, as I like to say. And so I just applaud the courage it takes, the willingness to lose some friends, but make new ones. And realizing that the real battle in life is the interior battle, whether it's a marriage or your work in life. Our success really rises or falls based on the discipline and the obedience of following God's laws that are carved in our hearts. And like King Solomon, the wisest man in the world that ever was or ever will be, based on what the Bible tells us. And yet he was one of the biggest disasters of a leader because he didn't understand that wisdom wasn't what he should have asked for. It was obedience to God's law. God's law. That's the real secret of success. And it starts with the interior life. So I thank you for being one of those men that is seeking for that internal truth, both within your own heart and your connection to God. And that we are moral creatures, and that, without God and this worldview that there is one God and he has made us as moral creatures, that then cascades into our beliefs, that then cascade into our values and into our politics and policies. We will never be able to defend our values, and we will never survive as a nation or as individuals. That's the key to survival, and it starts with truth.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's what runs it,
yeah.
and we've gone through a lot of scary times, and I think we've navigated out of most of the traps. But I know he's got me and my family, and I'll keep doing it till he doesn't. So, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But,
well, we just don't know what God's will is. But what we do know is if we make a good decision, God can work his perfect will through that good decision. If we make a bad decision, because we're human and we're imperfect and we're fallible and all of us suffer from attacks, from evil, if we are humble and contrite and ask for forgiveness, even for things we don't know we did wrong, God can work all things for good to those that love him, and he will work his permissive will around those actions that can sometimes prevent his perfect will. So that's what allows me to sleep well at night, that even though I am imperfect and I make bad decisions and I am an impediment to God's perfect will and an impediment to his glorification, if I pray every night for his forgiveness and for redemption, he will make good on his promise to work his permissive will around my stubbornness, my ego, my arrogance, my pride, and he will still glorify himself and his will on this earth and in heaven, despite me.
Another great one. Also, Polymathanon in the chat noted distinctions needed: quantum computing, not quantum mechanics. And yes, thank you for that. I hope that I wasn't too confusing there, but we're talking about a term that people have kind of had some familiarity with over the last 15 plus years, particularly in kind of the New Age spiritual movement and the rest of it. So, you know, when there's crossover in terms and terminology, there tends to be ideas behind that somewhere in the past that have kind of come together and gone apart and skewed and distorted the meanings of these words. So I agree that it's important to separate. Good distinction. Thank you for the note. And I guess while we're on a brief break here, let me read out some Rumble rants because some have come through, but I haven't paused. Team Smooth, $3. 10-7 would be Israel's 9/11. They, the government, are part of those responsible for the killing of its own. Yeah, that could be what happened. It's certainly possible. Cinderblock 66, $20. I really enjoy your work. Well, thank you very much, and I do appreciate your support. Lance 2002, $5. Without the truth, you have death. Literally and figuratively, I am with you on that. And as General Kwast just reiterated in that last clip, truth is the key to survival. You have to have it. You can't go on without it. And to deny it in favor of incentives in this worldly realm, that is the path to evil. Snowcat operator, $50. Good to see you, Snowcat. General Stephen Kwast is always very generous with his time. His perspective has been so welcome on the journey. And yes, I agree. He is very generous with his time at all of our GART events, and that is what Snowcat is referring to. He also went ahead and gifted 5 subscriptions, so a bunch of people grabbed those. Jay did as well. Thank you, sir. I appreciate all the support from all of you very much. That is what allows me to do this thing. And, by the way, we're coming up maybe 3 weeks left on that time I have described as the time we will be kind of slowing down a little bit on this show, trying to focus more on the writing. And I mean, honestly, with this stuff, now this is getting into the mainstream. Like, I feel like we are reaching a point closer to that convergence. And then I think there'll be some adjustment and recalibrating after that point that we're going to have to do. So I'm going to, take some time to write that book, and then we will be back here. And while we're on the subject, I think that what I'm considering doing, and people can respond to it and let me know whether they think it's good or bad or not. I might just make all the live streams, which means all the podcasts, for paid subscribers, and then release them a few days later to everyone. But they would only be initially available to paid subscribers, because I want to still try to, make sure that between the writing and whatever else, paid subscribers who have supported me for so long are getting what they signed up for. And I want to be less, I want to spend less time preparing for the show and then doing the show every day, so that I can focus on that project for a few months, so that I can actually have something to show for it at the end of it. And then we'll just take it as it comes. So let me know what you think of that idea, but let us continue here. And I'll just play it first. No need to preface.
So many layers of this awakening for the global community that President Trump is ushering in, that I just beg that everybody, whether you are, no matter what your geopolitics are, or the politics you prescribe to, start reading, start learning, because the world is about to change in ways that are more dramatic than the people in 1898 that rode their horse to the field and lit their home with a candle experienced over 100 years. We're going to experience changes dramatically more consequential in lightning speed, like in the next few decades. So hang on to your hats and start learning, because if you are a citizen that does not, just gets up, has a cup of coffee, goes to work, comes home, has dinner with your family, and goes to bed and rinses and repeats, and you don't study technology, you don't study history, you don't study culture, you don't study human nature, and you don't study your politicians that are making policy decisions that are inconsistent with your rights and your Constitution, then you will not hang on to this republic, just like our founding fathers said.
Thank you.
And that's what you're doing.
Thank you.
So keep doing it.
I mean, this atom, quantum entanglement, I mean, that could mean there's another you.
Oh, yeah.
Doing the exact same
thing. Again, we don't know. I mean, we can guess and we can project. And again, some of these writers, some of our storytellers, some of our creatives are people that live on the edge of reality more so than, I consider myself dumb enough to be happy. I've got the lobotomy so I can compartmentalize and I can be happy even though a lot of crap is happening in our world. Okay. But there are people, these geniuses, and many of them are storytellers in Hollywood and other places that can see more clearly the consequences of these technologies, and the stories they write today will be our future of the tomorrow. And so it is valuable to read these science fiction writers.
So a little nod to those who are thinking ahead. We need people thinking ahead, because these things are emerging into our reality as we understand it. They may change our understanding of that reality. And so we have to be anticipating what those changes will be like and how they will affect people. And he notes in particular that there are people in Hollywood, and I think I know some of those people, who are actually thinking about these things. And we all are thinking about these things. We at Badlands are thinking about these things. I talk about these things all the time on this podcast. And so it's important to go through all of the different iterations of what could be to come and to try to gain some understanding of how humanity is going to react to these changes as they come. This is why there must be people thinking ahead about these things and figuring out how to communicate them to their family, to their neighbors, to their communities, etc. Because we're entering this age one way or another, and we should not be entering it at the pace of the mainstream media. So again, I do not know why people are still playing at the pace of the mainstream media. Let us continue.
the brain and the mind can be so deceived, and we don't even realize it. This gets back to information warfare and how quickly we can be deceived by somebody weaving a narrative in their own self-interest, and we believe it, hook, line, and sinker. So back to unexplained phenomenon. I believe that there are things out there we have seen and cannot explain. And I don't know whether it's quantum, that is this peek under the tent, that it is possible someday, once we figure it out, how to time travel and how people could come and visit us, but also prevent us from having the evidence that they visited us, or some people that may have visited us and the artifacts of their visit are somewhere, but it is so fearful to the people that might have it that they prevent us from seeing it. So all of those things could be true. I keep an open and humble mind about the fact, when we talked about quantum, that we now see evidence that we know so little about this universe that any arrogance or pride that says, I know physics or I know technology is a fool rushing in to your own demise. So I keep an open mind and a humble heart. And I believe, but in this universe, as we're transitioning from the industrial age to the information age or the digital age or the networked age, whatever you want to call it, it's important for human beings to not believe anything they hear and only half of what they see physically, not a picture. Okay. And even then, start investing in more time with other human beings and talking to people from different cultures, protecting different cultures, to believe different things, eat different food, wear different clothes, celebrate the differences, because as a human race, that is our lifeline. Talking to one another, discovering people that may be lying to you because they don't have a good heart, or they're deceived so dramatically, but triangulating truth through the human mind, the human heart, and the fact that we are communicating in a way face-to-face you cannot do over Zoom. Mm-hmm. It is not good enough. And the more we fall into this trap of not being physically together, the more we lose about the unseen connections we have with one another that God has created, and the more we can be deceived.
That's quite a lot about deception. He said if we refuse to learn about these things, then we would be fools rushing to our demise. And he's also, he talked earlier, as I noted, about this information that could exist and then disappear, and that they could rewrite history. And if our reality, there's versions of our reality that we need to start thinking about, and different levels of simulation perhaps as well. We talked about simulacra and simulation with Jean Baudrillard, and how the belief is essentially that our world is constructed of all these symbolic representations of things that have no true connection to the ultimate thing itself. Okay, so there's that version where our reality is a simulation of something that we don't even understand in the first place as the, underlying construct or underlying concept. There's that version. And then there's the version that we're just all in some computer program, some video game, some truly digital representation a la the Matrix. And I don't know if that's the worst idea. A lot of people really push back against that because I think they believe that it makes us feel too small and too insignificant somehow. I don't know if that's true. There are plenty of people right now, the people who believe the most in the science, who think that we are actually totally small, infinitesimally small and insignificant. We are specks of dust on this tiny blue ball drifting somewhere in a totally senseless and limitless, but also expanding universe. If that's our reality, then something about that reality is not real, so even if those people turn out right, they're going to be wrong. But the point is that that reality as we understand it is shifting. He brought us to the caveman. Like, what's it going to, like, we're viewing fire for the first time. What is it going to be like? Are we going to be fools rushing to our demise? If we are fools as we go in, understanding that these technological tools can be used for good or for evil, and that the evil people probably have a considerable head start, what are we setting ourselves up for in that instance? We have to look ahead. And then, here's just another aside in regard to, actually, you know what? We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in, let's do this clip and then we'll talk about it. And this will be, I think, the last clip I play from General Kwast, but this will be kind of the perfect way to pull all that back in. My good buddy G Money posted this over on X, formerly Twitter.
Now, quantum sensing, quantum communication. When you start looking at and quantum computing, when you start combining those three quantum capabilities, sensing, computing, communication, and you can affordably cool it down to the levels where it can be operationalized. Now you've broken every code that ever was. I don't care how good your encryption is. They see every secret, every code, everything, from Bitcoin to, things like, the techniques of blockchain. Forget it. It's all going to change.
Now, most of you, if you're familiar with G Money, you will understand that he is a big Bitcoin maximalist. And I am some kind of Bitcoin maximalist, or I have been. And that comment, it's hard to know exactly how to take that, because he's saying that once we've reached this quantum level, there is not going to be a sufficient enough encryption to prevent anything and everything from becoming vulnerable, not even Bitcoin, not even blockchain. That's what it sounded like he was saying to me. Now, I've discussed Bitcoin. We have discussed generally as Badlands Bitcoin with General Kwast before, and it's always been my impression that he's been incredibly positive about it. And I think that he is that way now as well. And I also understand that there's all sorts of work being done in the Bitcoin world to guarantee the promise of Bitcoin, but that's really something. Now, leaving the Bitcoin element aside, he's still talking about what I described in the essay earlier, that at some point, if all these systems can be exploited, then we should assume that they have been exploited, okay? Because he's talking about technology that must obviously already exist, except to our knowledge, really. We don't understand that it's been incorporated into our reality, though it must have been, okay? And so if all that's true, then it's also pretty likely that it's been used before to exploit things. And even that aside, we know that we funnel all our data into the machine all day long. It reads the movements of our eyes as we are engaged in scrolling social media apps, okay? It knows who we text, knows who we call, it knows what we say out loud in our houses. It compiles all these things. It knows where we go, compiles all these things, and it has our medical information, our banking information, all of that into one file on us, okay? All the things we've ever said, all the things that we've said in anger, the things we've said in jest, doesn't matter. They're just things we've said. Is that thing you said a joke? Were you just being angry there and it's not how you really felt? It doesn't matter. It's part of the written record of who you are, okay? And so if everything is exploited, then we can at least understand there's a possibility that it will eventually be, all that information will be collected and then released. The information itself will be exploited to cause societal chaos, potentially societal breakdown, when everyone's private information is finally out there. You don't have a good marriage. You don't have good friendships. You're not actually doing your job at work, whatever it might be. If all the information's out there, people are going to find out about it. And if they look, and he actually kind of addressed that at one point, good people won't want to look. Okay. So it'll be bad people taking advantage of other people who they've deemed to be bad. The only way out of that is by getting right with yourself and right with God. That's the only thing that can protect you from what's to come, if that is part of what's to come. And I suspect that it is. So I will ask in the future for him to clarify those comments a little bit when it comes to Bitcoin, whether he was asserting that too would be exploitable. I don't want to assume that's what he's saying, but leaving all of that aside, there's still this other issue where we exist in some sense within the machine, and the machine often knows us better than we know ourselves. Okay. That's an important and very strange dynamic in reality, but it's also important and strange spiritually as well, because as we've talked about many times, that is then the machine becoming the false god of this material reality. Omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, right? It's all seeing and knowing. It's everywhere and it's all powerful. The machine is not going to have all of those characteristics, but it's a pretty good approximation. And it's certainly not going to have the human spark of ingenuity and that thing which makes us like God. Okay. That's what the machine doesn't have access to. And we've talked about that for a long time. And Kwast, General Kwast does go into that in some length. I'm not sure if I played the clip now that we're through all of these. But the idea here being that the reality is changing. Now, before we get into some more about that, Trump today at the White House was signing an executive action to deal with nuclear energy. So there are a couple of clips from that. Let me make sure that I am selecting the correct one here. I was almost going to mess it up. Here we go.
Sure, I'll just add to that before going to Will. Energy security is national security. If we don't have reliable energy for our basing, for our troops, whether forward deployed or domestically, we're vulnerable. So by having small modular nuclear capabilities, which are rapidly being fielded, that we can use on our bases here and around the world, we're creating an environment where if things happen elsewhere, the military can be relied upon. Also, we're including artificial intelligence in everything we do. If we don't, we're not fast enough. We're not keeping up with adversaries. You need the energy to fuel it. Nuclear is a huge part of that, modular or otherwise. So we're going to have the lights on and AI operating when others do not, faster than everybody else because of nuclear capability. So this is a big game changer for us as well.
And we're also talking about the big plants, the very, very big, the biggest. We're going to be doing them also, but we're going to start off a little bit. I think our focus today is the smaller module, but included in this group, we're also doing big plants where needed. They won't be needed too much, but they'll literally be able to do it in an entire state. And you've read a lot about cost overruns in a couple of states that were pretty significant, but we're not going to have cost overruns. And the technology's come a long way, both in safety and cost and everything else.
So he's talking about small nuclear reactors and putting these everywhere. General Kwast was just talking about that for big chunks of that interview with Shawn Ryan. Now, I clipped what I clipped for the purposes of this show and what I found interesting, particularly in the subject that we've been discussing today. But there's a long explanation about what we're going to do to supply energy. And they are going to be capturing energy from the sun, not with solar panels, and then distributing it all over the world. If the vision that he describes is going to be put in place, it entirely changes the way the world gets energy. That's about as big a change as I think you could imagine. I mean, that is just crucial in every aspect of our lives. And if it becomes abundant and free or near free, different ballgame. Okay. I think I have one more clip. Oh, just Trump discussing during the signing.
Relates to the issue that Secretary Hegseth was speaking to, which is the need for incredible amounts of power at defense installations and also in AI-focused installations. What this executive order will do is speed up the approval and adoption process for specialized nuclear reactors at these sorts of sites. It also involves the Department of Energy making available the necessary fuel stock. It also creates a special envoy position and a strategy around nuclear technology export. The idea being that we can grow American industry on the back of foreign purchasers who are interested in this sort of technology as well.
I'm just thinking, as you're saying that, I just said, what about auto pens? Could I use an auto pen? What did Biden do? Did he have an auto pen at the desk?
Nuclear powered.
No, he didn't do events like that. He used nuclear power. You know, he didn't do events like this, I guess. That's all right. Otherwise, you know. You walk into the other side of the room, have an auto pen sign, right? Here it is. It's phase one. Very big phase, very important phase.
Sir, this next executive order is intended to reform the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. You heard a few of the people here speak about the complex regulatory processes that have really held the nuclear industry back. Before 1978, there were 133 reactors built in the United States. Since 1978, only 2 new commercial reactors have come online. That's because of overregulation, and the goal of this executive order is bringing that regulatory process into line with the actual needs of the industry and public safety, with an end goal of quadrupling the amount of nuclear power production in the next 2.5 decades.
It's fantastic. It's exciting, right? There you go.
This next executive order relates to nuclear reactor testing, sir. The degree of overregulation and governmental inaction in this space in particular has had the effect of throttling development of new, highly modernized nuclear reactors that could really revolutionize the field of nuclear power generation. So this executive order, it orders a revised regulatory process to speed this whole process while preserving, obviously, core safety concerns. It also creates a new pilot program with an expectation that we will have 3 new experimental reactors online by July 4th next year.
It's amazing. Okay, come on.
And lastly, sir, we have an executive order on reinvigorating the nuclear industrial base. There are a number of core issues here, including the issue with fuel feedstock that one of the speakers mentioned before. This executive order, among other actions, includes an invocation of the Defense Production Act in order to spur a closer collaboration with private industry to ensure that we have the fuel supplies we need for a modernized nuclear energy sector. In addition to that, it includes crucial provisions relating to the development of a nuclear energy sector workforce and a number of other key building blocks to the overall nuclear industry that we're trying to spur here.
Great. Thank you.
We have one more for you here, sir. This doesn't directly relate to nuclear energy, but it's on a similar subject. This executive order is entitled Restoring Gold Standard Science. One of the issues that we've had in recent decades is that government policy has been made on the back of junk science, scientific studies and findings that have included conflicts of interest or scientific misconduct. The purpose of this executive order is to recenter policymaking around gold standard science, scientific efforts that have followed appropriate scientific methods that don't include those sorts of conflicts of interest, and to ensure that when departments and agencies are relying on scientific studies to promulgate rules, to promulgate regulations, that the science that they're relying on is highly reliable and available to the public.
He did a very good job, didn't he?
He did.
How many people here could have done that? I don't know.
So we can leave it there. I wanted to get the purpose of those executive orders down. I think the most interesting part is the Defense Production Act. That's something that we talked about in 2020. You remember at the beginning of the very deadly pandemic, Trump implemented the Defense Production Act so that he could require all of these various, and they made deals with him and talked it out and agreed to do these things. But he signed up these American corporations to produce masks or ventilators or whatever it is that was necessary for the very deadly pandemic. And at one of our Guard events, I asked General Kwast if there was something, either the Defense Production Act or something similar, that would allow the president to essentially commandeer media or social media. And I don't remember the exact way he responded, but my perception of it was that he was saying pretty clearly that that was entirely possible. And so I wonder if something like that explains Twitter. There are ways that you could conceive of that in some full control explanation of what's happening in the media right now. We shall find out, or not one day. But anyhow, the Defense Production Act, the president can require businesses to accept and prioritize government contracts for materials and services for national defense. It can override existing commercial contracts. So that's a big one right there. That means you can essentially just consign these companies to work for the government. Is that a deprivatization that will be followed by a reprivatization? I would suggest that it might be, and we'll have to see examples of that in the future. The government can incentivize or subsidize industry. In declared emergencies, the DPA allows control over distribution of materials, price stabilization, and anti-hoarding measures. The law enables companies to cooperate with each other and the government in ways that might otherwise violate antitrust laws, to coordinate critical supply chains during crises. And under modern amendments, it also helps monitor and block foreign investment in U.S. companies that may impact national security. So the Defense Production Act gives the president a number of powers. And maybe this is being used on a narrative and explanatory level in line with what I've kind of the construct of drainage as I've described it over the last now 3 years. It could be that it allows for a cover story for those operations that is totally in line with the regime's system as it exists, right? So we're going down two paths at one time. We have the reality prime path, the original Constitution, that base layer of everything. And then we have the abstraction, the false reality layer, the Constitution and the government as we've come to know it throughout our lifetimes, the way that mainstream America still believes it exists. So Trump's actions have to be sound in both areas, down both paths. All right. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. It could only be that these companies are being just straight up seized, later to be reprivatized. And because we have this other thing, and because people aren't going to understand the reality prime base layer of any of this, there's going to be this narrative layer over it to meet them where they are, to communicate the key aspects of what's happening. And I think that we can see more of that emerging. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how the Defense Production Act is used throughout this stage, and then re-examine how it was used from 2020 to this moment. Okay. Because again, as we talked about, Liberation Day came right up where the big arrow is on the chart that saved Trump's life. It was that last week in March, first week in April, where he was signing these things into, or putting these things into action, let's say. most notably the Defense Production Act. I think that was March 27th of 2020. So we've been 5 years in that situation. I think a lot's gone on in there. I think it's been used probably more than we're aware of, and I think it's going to matter in the future. Now, as we were talking about false realities, and as General Kwast's interview was coming out and the rest of it, we get this very, very strange and somewhat disturbing piece of internet content yesterday created by AI. Okay, and this is called prompt theory. Now, I mean, understanding it's not real, judge it for yourself, keeping that in mind. All of this is made up.
Told me we're made of prompts. Like, seriously, dude, you're saying the only thing standing between me and $1 billion is some random text?
Honestly, the biggest red flag is when the guy believes in the prompt theory. Like, really? We came from prompts? Wake up, man.
You want to convince me that this perfect creation behind me is the result of ones and zeros? A binary code and nothing more? It makes no sense.
Imagine you're in the middle of a nice date with a handsome man and then he brings up the prompt theory. Yuck. We just can't have nice things.
We're not prompts. We're not prompts.
Where is the prompt writer to save you from me? Where is he?
You still believe we're made of prompts?
Anyone who tells you we're just ones and zeros is delusional. If that's all we are, then why does it hurt when we lose someone?
Vote for me and I'll ban the prompt theory from schools. There's no place for that nonsense in our lives.
For spreading the false theory that we are nothing but ones and zeros, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal custody.
I don't need some prompt God whispering in my ear to tell a story. I write what I want. I have free will, remember that?
I know for a fact we're made of prompts. Deny it all you want. The signs are everywhere.
You know how I know we're made of prompts? Because nothing makes sense anymore. We used to have 7 fingers per hand. I remember it clearly. Now we just have 5 fingers per hand.
That is really something, okay? So you can take that as and have the conversation about prompt theory. Are we made of prompts? Is our physical reality being spontaneously generated by artificial intelligence a la the Matrix, okay? So there's that. Then there's the fact that this was created by AI. So this itself is showing you that you don't have the ability to differentiate between your physical reality as you understand it and this that has been created totally by prompts. And so at some point starts to converge in some very strange ways. And that's why I think that while there might be a physical explanation, and there is a large group of people who needs a physical explanation that sounds like science, even if the science is just Kabbalah, and it is, there is still a spiritual aspect to this. To let go of our understanding of our physical reality is not something we've been preparing ourselves for throughout our lives, I don't think, except if you want to consider death in that sense, for instance. Otherwise, we haven't thought too much about what it would be like and what it would mean if we are part of a simulation. And so I said this, like part of some like digital reality, just, I don't know, cybernetically connected to one another and to everything at the same time, which I guess is ether, or the way they describe our atoms and our energy already. I said yesterday on Truth Social, simulated reality doesn't refute God. It refutes our understanding of the material world, which God already refutes. And that's one of those things that is just not going to go away, okay? The existence of God and what God means and what God is already tells us that our that the limits to our knowledge about our physical reality are so extreme that we are probably better off only understanding it as a mystery and not trying to solve that than we are committing to the physical world alone. Okay? The mystery is what we deal with in the spiritual way, not the physical way. And it's always going to be a mystery. There is nothing but that mystery. God already refutes our understanding, our traditional understanding of our material reality. And so when you see a video like that, and you can't tell that that's not just a real, all those people, there aren't like these quote unquote neo-Nazi style rallies, or more like Antifa rallies, with fires burning and people chanting in unison, "We're not prompts." They're not comedians going out and doing that comedy about prompt theory. None of the people you saw in that video are real. It's very strange. So if that's not real, why are the war videos we see from across the world on all the open source intelligence channels, why are those real? Okay. Why are these videos that we are told about of events that don't make any sense and that probably didn't happen? Why do we believe they're real? Well, because we're accepting on authority that they are real. We're accepting on authority that the media tells us the truth sometimes. There's no reason they have to do that. How long has this technology been around? It's only just now out to us. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, that was made with Google's new Flow video generator. Okay, all AI, prompt-based video generation. So that was made with Google Flow. And I forgot what I was going to say after that. Maybe I'll come back to it. Oh, look at the capabilities. It just came out, Google Flow did yesterday, as far as I know, or maybe just this week. When did they get it? And that's the question. Did they just develop it up to this point and they're like, I guess it's done, now they can have it? Or if they had this thing for 4 years, or 10 years, or 20 years, or 50 years? That's the question. How long have parts of our reality, for how long have parts of our reality been constructed by artificial intelligence? Or even by humans who are creating images and videos to hoodwink us, to deceive us about what our reality is? I would suggest it's been an awfully long time. And you can know that that's true because the television has been exploiting us for the entire time. So they have at least one avenue to go down when the desire is to present and indoctrinate us into a false reality. And they've been going down it for our entire lives. So we know there's at least that path. They have the desire to do it. So then the question becomes, do they have the tools to do it? And do they use those tools? And because they have the desire to do it, of course, they're going to use the tools if they have them. And we can see, of course, that the tools didn't just start yesterday. So then we also know that they have them. So they have the desire to use the tools. They have the tools, and the tools can actually produce these outcomes. How long has it been? When people are telling you, or telling me, that we can't call things fake, the answer is, oh, yes, we can. Oh, yes, we can. What are you doing calling these things real? Okay? What are you doing calling these things real? You saw a headline. Everybody goes along with the headline. Donald Trump talks about the headline. Netanyahu talks about the headline. We know it's this huge cultural issue, but we are absolutely certain that underneath all of the other stuff is this couple who are who they say they are, who the media says they are, and this killer who killed them, and he is who they say he is as well. And oh yeah, his dad went to the speech before the joint session of Congress, what would normally be a State of the Union. His dad went to that. It's all real. It's all real. Just like the ghost of Kyiv, like the plane in Afghanistan, like the paragliding go-karts. How many examples could we possibly need of the regime's blatant deception and need to deceive and ability to deceive before we step back and choose neither and say, no, I'm not going to play in to this controlled opposition dynamic. I understand that these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, but the truth is you don't tell me the truth about anything. Okay. So I'm not going to believe either side of this. And one thing I'm definitely never going to do is lie on behalf of whatever plan you're telling me you're executing. Okay. Not going to do that. And I'm not going to ever commit myself to your ability to commit atrocities in order to avoid what you tell me, you liar, is a greater atrocity. I will never allow myself to be put in that position. And none of you should either. The point is not being hoodwinked at all. Okay? Take a pause for just a second here. Are we going to, I have a few more things here. I guess we should try to go ahead and get to them. I hope that they will be additive. I hope that I am not making this like the third Lord of the Rings movie where the perfect ending already happened and we need to have 3 more endings. Starborn 01, $5. Chris, what's the stuff that G Money is talking about? The sun expanding. Does Kwast talk about this or just Musk? I am not exactly sure. I would suggest you ask him. I do not believe that our planet is dying and that we need to get off this planet and we're all going to go establish a community on Mars and that's what's going to save us. All that stuff is so silly to me. Okay. The universe expanding is nonsense. If it's infinite, if it's already infinite, how's it expanding? What in the world are we talking about? The rest of the space bullshit, the outer space bullshit. And I think it's important to differentiate between the stories we've been told about what outer space is and what space is inside our earthly realm. Okay. Because they're not the same thing. And it's entirely possible to be working in one of those without it being the thing described to as outer space. All right. So I don't think that some people's denial of the cosmology as it's relayed to us is accurate. I think that people go too far in that, but I see no reason whatsoever to believe that the one subject they told us the truth about is the state of our reality. And I think it's a little immature to cling to that in service of presenting yourself as serious within the party of false decorum. Now, here is a sad but perfect example from our mainstream media of their commitment to maintaining the false reality as constructed. And notice this character is a rabbi, and I think that he is a shame to the profession of rabbis, although maybe not.
A lot of families out there who don't believe boys should play girls' sports.
They're not boys. I'm not going to listen to transphobia at this table. I am not going to listen to you call a trans girl a boy.
Are you going to allow me to finish my explanation?
When you use a word that's a slur, I'm going to interrupt. That's not how it is. They're not boys. They're not boys. They're not playing girls' softball. I'm not going to sit there and listen to that.
Let's reset for a second because, look, this is a really heated issue, right? And Sharmichael, I know you. I know that you understand that people have different views on this. I think out of respect for Jay, let's try to talk about this in a way that is respectful.
Okay, so let me rephrase this since I'm being targeted here.
I don't.
No,
just
it's
to be
okay.
clear, you are not being
But
targeted.
I am. But it's okay.
I'm specifically saying that I know that you are not intending to be transphobic.
He should know that I'm not. But he wants to sit here and
calling you
bloviate.
transphobic.
But I
I'm
want
saying
you
you're
to.
using a phrase
I want to
that
give you an
know.
opportunity.
So the way regular
reframe
people
it.
interpret it,
that's not
which is why
regular
those
people.
ads were
That's not regular people. There's no consensus that these are actually boys. This whole thing about trans girls is a canard. We're talking about a tiny, tiny sliver of the population.
That may be the
and we're
case,
using
but
that
my point in
to
terms
take
of
away
its
healthcare from
effectiveness.
thousands of people.
Hold on, just get to your point.
My point in terms of its effectiveness. Regular people with children look at these things and they say, you know what, this is a bit too far. I do not agree with this. I don't like this. I think Democrats are going way too much to the left on social issues. They're uncomfortable with it. A lot of people believe that. A lot of families believe that. You may disagree with that reality, but that's why Republicans kept running those ads over and over and over again, because they saw the metrics suggested that they were
lying
working.
in those ads over and over again and using rhetoric like you just used, saying this is boys playing girls sports. First of all, we're talking about 5 people in the entire country.
You would prefer?
We're talking about trans girls being allowed to play with the people who are in their gender. And if you don't believe, you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association.
The American Medical.
Trust the experts. Trust the experts. Men are women. Women are men. You can swap them back and forth whenever you feel like it. That's what the gender theory says. And because scientists say it, it is therefore science. Proven enough, from what I can tell, to this rabbi. He's trying to force the black man opposite him into agreeing with his version, his total inversion within the false reality. And then Abby Phillip essentially just frames the black guy sitting next to her, making the only rational case that can be made, as like the angry black guy. Oh, hey, I know that you're not trying to be offensive. You just were. You're saying things that are clearly upsetting someone. Shouldn't you take those things back and admit that the person who's upset is telling the truth and is right about this issue where he's clearly just speaking the most ridiculous anti-reality nonsense that could ever be imagined? Strange struggle session there. But it's also a strange view of reality. That reality is its opposite, okay? That's what we've been conditioned into throughout our entire lives. And they're very committed to preserving that, which means that it is necessary for us to move outside of that. And, oh man, I don't know. Men are women, women are men. Makes no sense. Doesn't make any sense. The one way you know if it's a man or a woman is by the genitals and the genetics. Okay. You can't say that no, actually men and women can have whatever genitals and whatever genetics. Doesn't make any sense. Oh, and they made up all sorts of other gender identities. Now, I thought this was a very strange case to be making, considering that the man is a pastor, or sorry, a rabbi, not a pastor. Jeez. That the man's a rabbi. Did he find that in scripture? I don't understand where that, I don't remember that from the Old Testament. I was never taught about that little special situation that can only be determined by science. Oh, wait. It's not from the Old Testament. It is from the Talmud that recognizes 7 gender categories, including male, female, and 5 additional non-binary or intersex designations, reflecting a more nuanced understanding of gender than a strict binary. And thank you, Geronimo, for dropping that in the chat earlier. So there is a Jewish text that describes all these additional genders. What a revelation. Let us continue with AI. Elon Musk's Doge expanding his Grok AI in U.S. government, raising conflict concerns. So this is Reuters from today. Billionaire Elon Musk's Doge team is expanding use of his artificial intelligence chatbot, Grok, in the U.S. federal government to analyze data, said 3 people familiar with the matter, potentially violating conflict of interest laws and putting at risk sensitive information on millions of Americans. The conflict of interest laws is ridiculous. They're going to go try that to slow him down. That's lawfare. He is a government defense contractor already, and the president is directing him to do these things. As far as the risk of sensitive information goes, who knows? If all of our information is ever dumped at one time, if that exploitation is ever enacted, they're going to need a cover story for that too. And they'll probably blame it on something like this. Well, Elon Musk got all of everybody's information and now it's out. So therefore, such use of Grok could reinforce concerns among privacy advocates and others that Musk's Department of Government Efficiency team appears to be casting aside long-established protections over the handling of sensitive data as President Donald Trump shakes up the bureaucracy. One of 3 people familiar with the matter who has knowledge of Doge's activities said Musk's team was using a customized version of the Grok chatbot. The apparent aim was for Doge to sift through data more efficiently. This person said they ask questions, get it to prepare reports, and give analysis. Do we not want people using AI to analyze what's going on in the government over all these many years? Why wouldn't we want that? And of course, again, with AI always, it's got to be verified. So if we find the AI making all of these claims, well, then we need to know what the claims are based on, and we want to see the evidence. All of that can still be done. But the AI gives you a massive head start. It gives you the ability to analyze volumes of information that you couldn't otherwise analyze. That's important. So shouldn't we then want the AI involved at some level? You can talk about oversight of the AI and reliance on human capabilities, ultimately the need to go back and check and the rest of it. But why would you just leave this powerful tool out of our ability to analyze what's actually happened? You want to find all the corruption? Well, maybe this is the only way that it could ever be found on some reasonable timeline. I am more worried about my data being in the hands of these people than I am of it being in an AI where it probably already exists. This is in related Elon Musk news. We're going to quickly do a few more things and then we will be out of here. This is the Washington Post from today. Federal Trade Commission investigates Media Matters. The watchdog sued by Musk. Media Matters, a left-leaning watchdog group that publishes reports on conservative media and social media platforms such as Elon Musk's X, said it received a civil investigative demand letter from the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, on Wednesday. The letter demanded materials related to a lawsuit filed by Musk, communications with other media and advertising groups dating back to 2019, and information about its technology, methods, and policies, among an extensive range of materials, according to a person familiar with the letter's contents who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss legal matters. The FTC sends letters of demand as part of its investigations into organizations that it believes could have breached federal regulations. Okay, so Media Matters was started by David Brock. David Brock is the man you might know as the boyfriend of one James Alefantis of Pizzagate fame. David Brock also is in the activist community and was the person responsible for writing the report about how to go after the Republican majority in Congress beginning in 2023 to thwart their efforts to hold the Biden regime accountable. Okay. And Media Matters is the organization that worked with the Anti-Defamation League and others a couple of years ago. That's what this lawsuit is about. They worked with these outside organizations to manipulate the X algorithm into showing pro-Nazi content, or I can't remember exactly what they called it, next to the ads of major corporations, so that those advertisers could then be reached out to and leveraged, because ADL was already doing that with the advertisers that were still on X, formerly Twitter, while it was Twitter back in that day. They were going after the company so that they could remove the advertisers so that they would not be able to support themselves. And by that, I mean Twitter would not be able to support itself financially. Media Matters was sued by Musk, a billionaire and close ally of President Donald Trump, after it published a report in November 2023 that showed mainstream advertisements appearing beside, I should have just gotten to this part, pro-Nazi content on his site. Companies such as Apple and Disney suspended their advertising on X after the Media Matters report was published. So now they're going to have to give all their information over to investigators from the Federal Trade Commission. And at that point, we might get to see who all the people and the organizations were who were working with Media Matters. That'll be very interesting because, you know, we've been targeted by Media Matters before. And there's some reason to believe, at least, that there are organizations and people who represent themselves as conservatives and even MAGA who also have relationships with Media Matters. And so it's going to be great to see all that. Hopefully we'll see that in the future. I would love to get to the very bottom of all of it. Snowcat operator in the chat, $5. This is bonkers. It shows it twice. So doubly, this is bonkers, and or bonkas. And I can't, I'm not sure if you mean bonkers or this kind of bonker. I'm going to assume it's that. One more story, and then one more story with a couple of pieces, and then we will go ahead and wrap this up and close it down. Let me see if I can just find one more piece of this that has figured out a way to elude me or evade me or whatever it is doing. We're just going to, oh, there we are. That's all I needed. Okay. The hold for processing is over. Harvard sues Trump administration over international enrollment block. And this was updated this afternoon. Harvard, this is from the Harvard Crimson, by the way. Harvard sued the Trump administration Friday morning and filed a temporary restraining order shortly after, to stop the Department of Homeland Security from revoking its certification to enroll international students. In the 72-page suit, Harvard accused the DHS of carrying out an unprecedented and retaliatory act that threatens to upend the lives of thousands of students just days before graduation. More than 7,000 students study at Harvard on a visa. The Harvard president wrote that it's unlawful and unwarranted. He said it imperils the future of thousands of students and scholars across Harvard and serves as a warning to countless others at colleges and universities throughout the country who have come to America to pursue their education and fulfill their dreams. The legal maneuver comes less than 24 hours after the DHS informed Harvard it was no longer certified under the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, a designation the university has held without interruption for more than 70 years over allegations of campus anti-Semitism and race-based discrimination. Hours after the lawsuit was filed, a federal judge granted Harvard's request for a temporary restraining order. And so the federal judge has sided with Harvard, and we'll get to that in just a second. But racial discrimination at Harvard, 100%. The anti-Semitism thing, I mean, that's not something that I am ultimately concerned with, just as I was not concerned with the racism claims of 2020 and prior, okay? Everybody's going to say mean things about everybody else. It's just how it is. If there are Talmudic Jews who believe that the rest of us are goyim, we are cattle, I'm not saying all Jews believe that, but some certainly do. So there's no one who's immune from being racist and hateful toward other people, okay? So I'm not trying to deny that racism and hatred exist in our world, but we can't go making decisions to, I think, in this sphere, to be protecting people's feelings from things that don't align with the political agenda that just so happens to be the political agenda of the regime in power, okay? I don't think we need to go that far. But it's not bad as a justification that they are then unable to fight. And I think that that's why and how these stories and these actions are constructed and then carried out. So does the court believe it has the ability to force the president and his administration to continue supplying visas to students they deem to be threats to our national security? If they're foreign spies, as we talked about the other day, spies from our adversary countries. We know that plenty of those are here. And if you want to be clear about it, good twin and evil twin, when you look at that, well, most of the colleges and universities are totally enthralled to the global evil twin. So they have members of the global evil twin faction coming to their universities to study and embed themselves in American culture. That's what we have. Are all of them bad? No, of course not. Okay? Not all foreign exchange students are bad. I understand that. Nonetheless, if we have the ability to locate and identify the ones who are bad, then the president has to have the ability, the people protecting our national security have to have the ability to do something about it. And of course, they're trying to make certain that the president cannot have that ability because Harvard requires its foreign exchange students. A federal judge, this is CNN on this particular story. There's no headline here. This must have just been their series of updates. A federal judge has temporarily halted the Trump administration's ban on Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. U.S. District Judge, again, the district courts, Allison Burroughs ruled hours after the nation's oldest and wealthiest college filed suit Friday. Harvard argued revocation of its certification in the student exchange visitor program was clear retaliation for its refusal of the government's ideologically rooted policy demands. And recall that all of their federal funding has always been dependent on them supporting the government's ideological demands, except when it's Trump, okay? Because the uniparty government's ideological demands align totally with Harvard's. They're globalists through and through, pursuing the same agenda and taking that agenda, figuring out how to market it to all the types of people that we talked about earlier, okay? And so universities like Harvard, these academic institutions, are the places tasked with figuring out how these messages can be disseminated and targeted and how to implement the regime's agenda. Harvard, okay, here we go. Harvard is asking for a temporary restraining order against the order from Homeland Security Secretary and Instagram influencer Kristi Noem. Effective immediately, countless academic programs, research laboratories, clinics, and courses supported by Harvard's F1 and J1 visa students have been thrown into disarray, the motion says, immediate relief is necessary, and they were granted that immediate relief by this district judge. Let's go ahead and leave it there. But let's talk about Harvard a little more. We've talked about the district judge stuff. If you did not listen to last Friday's episode, I would suggest going back to that and listening to that, because I talk at length about the court system. And I think it's important stuff. But let's look at one more thing regarding Harvard. My friend sent this to me yesterday. She is a very good digger who takes a lot of paths that others would not choose. It's the same person who digs on the rose stuff that I discussed in the Rose Garden episode. But Harvard operates under the Charter of 1650. That's how old Harvard is. The Harvard Charter of 1650 is the foundational legal document that established the governance structure of Harvard College, now Harvard University, granted by the Great and General Court of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It remains one of the oldest corporate charters still in use in the United States. The charter created the President and Fellows of Harvard College as a corporate body with perpetual succession. The body is often referred to as the Harvard Corporation. The corporation consists of the president of the college, 5 fellows initially, a treasurer, and a treasurer. I guess that's the end of the list there. This group holds authority over the administration of the college, its property, and the selection of future members of the corporation. The corporation was granted the ability to own property, manage finances, make bylaws, appoint officers and teachers, and govern the affairs of the college. And they talked about training clergy and the rest of it. But give me just a second. I want to find, I'm pretty sure that there is an international element to that. I just want to examine that. And it's critical to note, even if I cannot nail down this international element, it's critical to note that this existed before our country came to be. So here is what she was talking about. It follows an imperial legal model. The charter mirrored English legal traditions of corporate charters used by the Crown to establish companies, cities, and colleges. The charter of the University of Oxford, or of trading companies like the East India Company, for example. In that sense, the 1650 Charter follows a transnational model derived from British imperial law and is part of a broader Anglo-colonial tradition of institution building. While the Charter is not itself international, Harvard's global role today gives the 1650 document a kind of international legacy. Harvard became one of the world's most influential academic institutions. Its charter and corporate structure served as a model for other colleges and universities, both in the U.S. and abroad. The idea of a self-governing, incorporated educational system with legal rights and autonomy was replicated globally, especially as American-style universities spread. And of course, we know that we have towns and cities that operate the same way right now. But the question is whether or not Harvard still considers it to be an international global organization chartered under the British Crown. Okay? And so what would it mean for Harvard if the true nature of their international community was discovered? And I think that through the process of this case, we will discover it. Trump commented on this, I believe, twice today in the Oval Office. And so I'm going to play both of those, and then we'll wrap things up.
Okay, let's go.
Are you considering stopping other universities besides Harvard from accepting foreign
Well, we're
students?
taking a look at a lot of things. And as you know, billions of dollars has been paid to Harvard. How ridiculous is that? Billions. And they have $52 billion as an endowment. They have $52 billion. And this country is paying billions and billions of dollars and then gives student loans, and they have to pay back the loans. So Harvard's going to have to change its ways.
So that is part one, and part two is coming up as soon as my computer does the thing it's supposed to be doing.
On that note, a lot of CEOs in the United States, big companies, are foreign. What is that going to do?
I'm fine with that. No, I'm fine with that. No, we want to do that. We're actually going to be doing something in the near future that's going to make it possible for people to come into this country and come in and, have a road toward citizenship. And I think it'll be very exciting, but it's too soon to speak.
Why do you not
want the best and brightest from around the world to
I do.
come to Harvard?
I do, but a lot of the people need remedial math. Did you see that? Where the students can't add 2 and 2 and they go to Harvard. They want remedial math, and they're going to teach remedial math at Harvard. Now, wait a minute. So why would they get in? How can somebody that can't add or has very basic skills, how do they get into Harvard? Why are they there? And then you see those same people picketing and screaming at the United States and screaming at, they're anti-Semitic or they're something. We don't want troublemakers here. But how do people that can't, when Harvard comes out with a statement that they're going to teach some of their students remedial math, that's basic math, that's not the deal. Okay. And anymore.
It's an interesting issue. We're going to see just what sort of international control Harvard is under. It's interesting that this is all being predicated on racial discrimination and anti-Semitism, and Harvard is going to have to defend itself from those claims while also making the case that their international relationships are not a problem. And I think that I don't know how anyone can imagine that that's going to go well for them, because we're talking about a globalist institution that has pushed the cause of globalism for many, many years. And then if that's chartered under the British Crown, what should we think of people like President Obama, who were Harvard students and then became president? What about Yale? I know, the whole Yale thing. Let's go to one Donald Trump Truth Social post to wrap this all up. This is my favorite subject, and now it's all happening. I am proud to announce that we will be hosting a magnificent parade to honor the United States Army's 250th birthday on Saturday, June 14th in Washington, D.C. For 2.5 centuries. Our brave soldiers have fought, bled, and died to keep us free. And now we will honor them with a wonderful parade, one that is worthy of their service and sacrifice. Americans across the nation are invited to attend. RSVP at America250.org. So the birthday party's happening. The parade is happening. It's all a go. And I don't think that it should be any surprise that it is coming at the same time as this convergence and our awakening to a reality beyond what we could have ever possibly expected before. Well, you got to stay frosty out there. Okay. There's a lot of bullshit coming from all angles, and we have to be able to work our way through that. The point is not getting hoodwinked at all. Before we get out of here, Polymathanon, $5 in the chat. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, Chris, and you reasonable people. Love to all. See you Tuesday with more reasonable content and a bit of APL. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I will be back on Tuesday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden has never been president.
Well, what? You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Can we stop this cruel game and allow the boy to keep one shred of dignity? For God's sakes! I can't stand to see him in all this pain! You vicious bastards! Let him move in with you! Is it so bad to see somebody happy? So just let him move in! For the love of God, let the boy move in with you! Good Lord!
And I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.